Chapter 1162. In the afternoon, a rumor spread in the inn. The value of Chu Yang, the extraterrestrial demon, had been made clear. Whoever could capture or kill Chu Yang could be killed or captured alive. They could obtain the status of a law enforcement officer, a generation friendship, gold medal jointly awarded by the big clans, and 10 million purple crystals. They could obtain the right to choose any martial technique from the law enforcement officer's arsenal. Everyone else also had a clear price tag. Everyone in the Chu clan also had a value. The value was different. All the blood payers in the world were netted at the same time. All the martial artists in the world were netted at the same time. They said that as long as the medicine banquet was successful, they would give me the status of a law enforcement officer. I didn't expect that not only was it not given, but it has also become my bounty. Chu Yang was depressed. That's right, this is too unfair. Rui Badong was also extremely depressed. We are all extraterrestrial demons. Why do you have so much, while the two of us only get 2 million purple crystals? And we don't get any other benefits? That's right. Dong Wuxiang was also very unhappy. Even if we can't be the same as you, we still have to divide the rewards. I don't have any objections if my value is set at 2 million, but why can Rui Badong be on the same level as me? We have to reduce his value by at least another 500,000. Rui Badong was furious. I don't have any objections if your value is higher than mine, but my value can't be reduced. You can raise your own net worth by 500,000. Dong Wuxiang said angrily, if it's increased by 500,000, won't it become 250? Do you think I don't know how to count? The two of them instantly glared at each other. Like fighting cocks. They actually had internal conflicts over the amount of reward that others put on them. Towards these two guys, Chu Yang directly ignored them. He was wholeheartedly planning for tonight's action. The current Chu Yang missed Mo Tianji very much. Now, he could only take one step at a time and make full use of his intelligence and wisdom. But he was powerless in the overall situation where everyone was his enemy. If Mo Tianji was here, Mo Tianji would first set the overall goal to turn the tables, and then push and act step by step until the end. You will realize that you have achieved your goal without anyone noticing. You have completely turned the situation around. Chu Yang sighed. He began to think with rapt attention. At present, he only had the strength of 3 people, but he wanted to attack the law enforcement division which was located in the hinterland of the continent. This difficulty could be said to be high. This was already the territory of the Yi clan. The law enforcement branch hall must be filled with experts and heavily guarded. Also, after the incident of the extraterrestrial devils, although the 3 of them had changed their appearances, anyone who was observant would know that they had arrived at this place. Therefore, the power of the law enforcement branch. They were definitely preparing to make a move at any moment. Wu Shang, Butong, we will do this. Then he drew a circle on the ground and stepped on it, 1 person in front, 2 behind, and so on. The eyes of the 2 lit up, and they gathered their heads together. They began to discuss. Chu Yang kept talking in a low voice, and the other 2 heads kept nodding. Yizhou Law Enforcement Branch. Recently, they had increased their strength by quite a lot. 2 first-grade supreme martial artists led 7 to 8 people here and passed down orders from the headquarters. They were stationed here as well. They were waiting for him to come and kill the extraterrestrial demon Chu Yang. And the original head of the branch, Nyo Dafa. He became an errand boy to pass down orders. However, Nyo Dafa was happy to do it. He was only a 2nd-grade martial saint, and 2 supreme martial artists came to make him an errand boy. What an honor! Therefore, Nyo Dafa was very excited. These few days, he was very busy, shouting at the top of his lungs and sending his subordinates into a frenzy. Especially in the last 2 days, news from various sources indicated that the extraterrestrial demon Chu Yang had already arrived in Yizhou. This made everyone even more vigilant as if they were facing a great enemy. Seeing that it was already evening, Nyo Dafa stood at the entrance of the hall with his hands behind his back, urging them to start eating. The supreme martial artists were all waiting. How could they delay? In an instant, the fragrance of wine and dishes wafted in the air. Delicacies were carried into the hall. The two supreme martial artists and their experts were all beaming with joy, and they made an exception to invite Niu Dafa to eat together. Overjoyed, Niu Dafa ran outside to wash his hands. Just as he was about to enter, he suddenly noticed the guard at the entrance shouting, "Who is it?" Niu Dafa shuddered and turned to look. He saw an old man in a white robe at the entrance. His clothes were as white as snow, his hair was as white as snow, and his eyebrows were as white as snow. His eyes flashed like lightning, and he was imposing without being angry. With his hands behind his back, he walked over leisurely. He really had an indescribable elegance and calmness, and an indescribable indifference. Niu Dafa couldn't help but frown. Why did an old man with a white beard come at this time? The old man walked up to them, and with his hands behind his back, he raised his head slightly and asked indifferently, "Is this the law enforcement hall?" The four martial kings guarding the hall were very depressed. Even if your eyesight is not good, just raise your head and look. The words Law Enforcement Hall of Yizhou are enough to dazzle your eyes. And you actually asked with your eyes wide open? The old man let out an indifferent, "Oh," and said arrogantly, "Who is the hall master of the Law Enforcement Hall? Ask him to come out and see me." The guards looked at him suspiciously, muttering in their hearts, "This old man is really arrogant. He actually wants the hall master to come out and see him. May I know, who are you, senior?" The two guards asked nervously. The old man in white smiled faintly and recited slowly, "This body is always outside the blue sky, this heart is always accompanied by the sun and moon. If you ask for my name and surname, I am the most handsome man in heaven and on earth." After reciting these 4 lines that did not make any sense but were full of bullshit, the white-clothed old man looked at the 2 confused guards and said, "Why aren't you going?" The 2 guards only felt that their heads were filled with paste. "Fuck, I still don't understand these 4 lines that you recited. How do I report this?" Niu Dafa looked from afar and increasingly felt that this old man was definitely an impressive figure. He walked over quickly, cupped his hands with a solemn expression, bowed, and said, "This brother, please." The old man in white rolled his eyes and shouted, "Stop! What did you call me? You actually dare to call me brother? You're really awesome." Niu Dafa said in shock, "I am Niu Dafa." "Brother, your name is Niu Dafa?" This time, it was the old man in white who couldn't remain calm. He stretched his neck and stared at him with his eyes almost popping out. Then, he realized that he had lost his composure and hurriedly retracted his neck. He coughed twice, stroked his beard, and rolled his eyes, saying, "That, Niu Dafa? Sigh, this name is really... Forget it, I can only do so. I say, Niu Dafa." Niu Dafa also finally understood that the other party was not satisfied with the way he addressed him. He said humbly, "Senior, please speak." "That's more like it." The old man in white laughed. "Niu Dafa, let me ask you, is the matter of the extraterrestrial demon true?" Niu Dafa puffed out his chest. "Of course it's true. I dare to guarantee with my integrity. I guarantee with my life." The old man in white rolled his eyes. "What integrity do you have? Your life, how much is it worth? Do you have anyone with a higher status here? I seriously can't trust a slippery fellow like you." Niu Dafa was embarrassed. He laughed dryly and said, "I still don't understand Senior's identity." The white-robed old man stared at him with wide eyes. He stared at him and said in surprise, "You didn't understand? Are you still from this heaven continent? What does this have to do with whether I'm from this heaven continent or not?" Niu Dafa cursed in his heart. He forced a smile on his face. "Senior, please enlighten me." The old man in white looked at him angrily and said, "I'll recite another poem. Listen carefully." As he spoke, he recited, "I'd rather see a knife at the edge of the world than meet the corner of the sea. The knife at the edge of the world can break, but the hatred at the corner of the sea can't be quenched." After he finished reciting, he looked at Niu Dafa complacently and said, "Niu Dafa, do you understand? Why aren't you trembling? Why aren't you worshipping?" Niu Dafa was even more confused. He said, This. He racked his brains, But he couldn't think of such an earth-shattering figure in his memory or in the history of this heaven continent. Why didn't he have any impression at all? He thought hard. The other party was so strong, so he must have some backing. Where did he hear this name from? The old man in white was furious. He took a step forward and slapped Nyo Dafa across the face. Nyo Dafa only felt that he was seeing stars. He staggered and fell. He was actually hit with a somersault. The old man in white didn't want to let it go. He rushed forward and slapped Nyo Dafa relentlessly. He muttered, "Nyo Dafa, you're really fucking awesome. How dare you say that you've never heard of me? I'll let you be awesome." Nyo Dafa had the cultivation of a martial saint, but he couldn't fight back under this old man's slaps. He couldn't even react. The sound of the slap was loud and clear. The two guards were stunned by what they saw. Where did this old man come from? He actually dared to beat up the hall master in the law enforcement hall. Stuff. There was a shout from the front. Two old men in black were standing on the steps of the hall with their hands behind their backs. Their eyes were bright as they looked over. The old man in white continued to slap Nyo Dafa. "Do you think I'll stop just because you say so? If I don't beat this audacious bastard to death today, I won't have the face to continue living in this world. I'm so angry. I'm so angry." He was slapping others while saying that he was angry. A figure flashed and one of the old men in black floated over. He stretched out his hand and caught the old man in white's hand. He said lightly, "Sir, if you don't stop now, it won't be pleasant." The old man in white snorted and looked at him from the corner of his eyes. He said, "Wow, the five of you seem to have some status. Or you, tell me your name." Chapter 1163. The elder in black looked at him coldly and said indifferently, "I am the gold medal law enforcement officer of the Law Enforcement Interrogation Hall, Tian Yud." Gold medal law enforcement officer. The white-robed elder exclaimed exaggeratedly, "Wow. So awesome." Looking at his posture and tone, I thought it was the Dharma Supreme who came. His tone is so perverted. Then he rolled his eyes and shouted, "Tian Yud, do you know who I am?" Tian Yud said angrily, "I don't care who you are. Let him go first." He had always been in charge of the interrogation hall and was always the one who made others angry. When had anyone ever bullied him? Now, he couldn't hold it in anymore. The white-robed elder's face turned serious and he said coldly, "I am Ning Haijiao." He took 2 steps forward and said indifferently, "Have you heard of me?" "Ning Haijiao? Never heard of you." Tian Yud snorted and said disdainfully. The white-robed elder, Ning Haijiao, had a desolate look in his eyes. With his hands behind his back, he sighed. "In this world, the people of the martial world are so forgetful. They even forgot about me. It's really terrifying." "Nameless person, you are courting death." Tian Yud's face was already black and he was about to attack. Ning Haijiao said with emotion, "Back then, we were born from the same mother and roamed the martial world side by side. The world's edge saber and world's edge sword shocked the world. How glorious that was! But because of a moment of carelessness, we were plotted against and retreated from the martial world. Only a few years have passed and no one knows about me anymore. The sorrow of life is really lamentable." Tian Yud strode over and said with a sinister smile, "The ends of the world? I will send you to the ends of the world right now." Wait. Behind him, another elder in black shouted loudly. Tian Yud said unhappily, "Sun Jin, what's wrong with you? Why did you shout at me?" Sun Jin ignored him and looked at the white-robed elder in shock and doubt. "Your surname is Ning?" The white-robed elder rolled his eyes and said, "If my surname is not Ning, then should I follow your surname?" These words were really impolite to the extreme. Sun Jin, however, broke out in a cold sweat. "May I ask what is your relationship with Ning Tianya, Supreme Martial Artist Ning?" As soon as the 3 words Ning Tianya came out, Tian Yud instantly felt as if he was struck by lightning. He was flabbergasted and took 3 steps back. He looked at the white-robed old man in front of him in disbelief. "Sigh, I originally didn't want to use my big brother's name to scare people." The white-robed old man, Ning Haijiao, sighed. Since all of you have recognized me, I might as well tell you that I'm Ning Haijiao, Ning Tianya's younger brother. Everyone was shocked and vomited at the same time. You're fucking not using your big brother's name to scare people. Look at how you're composing poems the moment you open your mouth. You're practically afraid that the world doesn't know about it. I really don't know how you're going to use your big brother's name to scare people. How preposterous. You say that you're supreme martial artist Ning's younger brother. May I know what evidence you have? Sun Zhen's voice already had some respect. Ning Haijiao raised his hand and threw out a jade pendant. He said, "Evidence. I originally didn't want to show it to all of you, but I've retired from the martial world and haven't meddled in the affairs of the world for a long time. In order to prevent others from saying that I'm a swindler, I have no choice but to lower my status." Sun Zhen caught the jade pendant and saw that there was a Ning character in the middle of the jade pendant. At this time, the experts in the hall had already walked out one by one. They surrounded the hall and watched this scene in whispers. Ning Tianya's younger brother? With such a high status, he actually came to Yi province now. To this law enforcement branch. A person's name was like a tree's shadow. Who dared to slight him? Everyone was very curious. Looking at this ordinary jade pendant in his palm, Sun Zhen was somewhat baffled. Damn it, this jade pendant is made of inferior white crystal. Only a Ning character engraved on it can prove that you're Ning Tianya's younger brother? If that's the case, this old man can casually make 8 to 10,000 pieces. What? Ning Haijiao rolled his eyes. You can't see the mystery behind it? To think that both of you are supreme martial artists. You're practically two pig heads. If you don't use your internal energy to activate the jade pendant, how can you show the pressure of a supreme martial artist? Do you actually need this old man to teach you such a principle? Sai, how did this world become like this? Not only do you not know how to respect your elders, all of you are still putting on airs, but all of you are actually idiots and full of shit for brains. Sun Zhen was so infuriated by his scolding that he almost flew into a rage. But in the end he still suppressed it. The white crystal contained a supreme martial artist's divine sense. With the simple material of the white crystal, it could actually contain a supreme martial artist's divine sense. This in itself was an inconceivable thing. Only those powerful people could store a supreme martial artist's divine sense in a piece of white crystal. An ordinary supreme martial artist would probably explode the moment he inserted it. Therefore, when they heard that there was supreme martial artist Ning's divine sense in it, everyone was somewhat convinced at first. All of you, take a look. Come closer and see the secret behind it. This old man isn't bluffing you. Ning Haijiao hugged his arms and looked up at the sky as he shouted. Everyone also really wanted to see how this white cauldron contained a supreme martial artist's divine sense. Because this represented a supreme control. This was a genuine high-level supreme martial artist technique. Once they were touched and comprehended a little, they would benefit immensely. Therefore, no one was in the mood to fuss over this old fellow's bossy attitude and they all gathered over. Even Yo Dafa, who was slapped violently just now, didn't care about his old face and went over to watch with his eyes wide open. As for the slap just now, Chuan Yo had already forgotten about it. In fact, he even felt honored. In this world, who had ever been slapped by Ning Tianya's younger brother? No one, right? It happened when one was old. Although it was a slap, but what a great honor this was. To think that I, Nyo Dafa, would one day be related to supreme martial artist Ning's Ning clan. I, Nyo Dafa, am really awesome under everyone's watchful eyes. Sun Zhen carefully placed the jade pendant in his palm and activated his essence energy. The jade pendant slowly emitted a sparkling and translucent white ghost, forming a halo of light. Everyone gasped in admiration. It was indeed a supreme martial artist technique. At this level, the supreme martial artist's divine sense was actually not exposed. Everyone became even more curious as they stared with their mouths agape. Even if they were forced to kneel on the ground by the sudden appearance of the supreme martial artist's divine sense, that would still be a rare experience. Sun Zhen's expression became even more solemn as he slowly increased the output of his essence energy. The next moment, bang! Without any warning, not only did the supreme martial artist's divine sense not appear on this ordinary white crystal jade pendant, it suddenly exploded. Everyone exclaimed in unison and were instantly dumbfounded. Pooh! A colorless and odorless gas was emitted from this white crystal pendant just like that. Everyone exclaimed and naturally had to open their mouths. They had already held their breaths for a long time just now. When they opened their mouths, they naturally had to breathe. This breath, almost everyone had a share. Most of this colorless and odorless gas was not wasted. Everyone inhaled a mouthful of it firmly. This colorless and odorless gas was really incredible. This was the innate poison that Miss Chu Lua had spent a lot of effort to come up with and give to her elder brother for self-defense. The amount of poison was huge and the toxicity was fierce. Even if it was someone like Ning Tianya, if he suddenly inhaled it, he would only feel dizzy. Other than immediately running away to find a place to expel the poison, he would definitely not have any other thoughts. Not to mention these people now? What is this? Sun Jin was caught off guard and inhaled the most. His eyes were already seeing double, and he felt so dizzy that the world was spinning. He scolded with difficulty, "What the hell are you doing?" But he only heard that Ning Haijiao chuckling and saying, "That's true, that's true. Ah, fuck, this medicine is really useful." Then there were a few thuds. Lord Ning Haijiao kicked each of these experts who had already been poisoned and were swaying. He scolded, "How dare you doubt my identity? I'm an extraterrestrial demon. What's wrong with pretending to be Ning Tianya's younger brother?" Sun Zhen and Tian Yud hadn't fainted yet. Upon hearing that, they could only complain. This time, we've really been cheated. It's actually the extraterrestrial demon Chu Yang and the rest. They hated themselves immensely. How could they be so careless? At the entrance, two figures flew in. With a palm each, two guards who hadn't recovered from their shock were sent flying and fell to the ground unconscious. Then, Sun Jin heard one of them ask, "But it's done?" This Ning Haijiao's voice was very smug. "Once I take action, how can it not be done? I'm Ning Tianya's younger brother. As the saying goes, those who are good at fighting don't have outstanding achievements. Once they take action, everything will be subtly settled. Don't talk nonsense." Another steady and heavy voice said, "Which one is more important than your identity? Quickly knock them out and take them away." Sun Zhen and Tian Yud's consciousness stopped at this point. They had completely fainted. Before they fainted, they were still thinking, "It's over. What kind of poison is this? How can it be so overbearing? Could it be the extraterrestrial demon's unique poison?" The three of them picked up Tian Yud, Sun Zhen and Yodafa as if they were flying and left in a flash. The last person walking was Burley. When he reached the entrance, he stopped and pulled out a big saber. With a sweep of his saber, he immediately returned the saber to its sheath and left as fast as he could. The saber light was like a waterfall. Once the saber was out, it immediately split into 7 or 8 saber auras. Like a gust of wind, it cut everyone in the courtyard who had already been poisoned into 2. Blood was dripping. With a flash, the 3 of them disappeared without a trace. By the time the experts from the law enforcement hall in the backyard rushed over, the scene had already ended. There were only corpses strewn all over the courtyard. Not a single living person could be seen. Everyone couldn't help but look at each other. What kind of powerful enemy could actually kill so many experts in one move without a sound? At the inn where Chu Yang and the other 2 were staying. Chapter 1164. Rui Budong and Dong Wushang agreed and left confidently. To the 2 of them, it was a piece of cake for them to get the information they wanted from the interrogation. Moreover, the 2 of them had other thoughts. Let's see who can get the information out faster. Not only must they be fast, but they must also not make any sound. This required skills. On Chu Yang's side, there was still Nyo Dafa, who was still unconscious. Chu Yang did not participate in the interrogation. Instead, he supported his chin with one hand and frowned, thinking about where to start this rescue mission. What should he plan and what kind of crisis he might encounter? After a while, Dong Wushang came over slowly. "There's news." Chu Yang's eyes flashed. Huh. 3 days later, the team escorting Han Xiaoran, Sha Xinliang and others will pass by Yi province. Dong Wushang's voice was very heavy and he tried to be concise. There are 8 supreme martial artists accompanying them. Among them, 4 are first-grade supreme martial artists, 2 are second-grade supreme martial artists, 1 is third-grade supreme martial artist and 1 is fifth-grade supreme martial artist. The remaining less than 30 people are all martial saints. Also, not only these forces on the surface, there are also experts protecting them secretly. But we don't know the exact number and cultivation. This escort is clearly a trap to deal with us. There's no doubt about it. Dong Wushang said, the day before yesterday, they got the news that we entered Yi province today. That's why they suddenly increased their speed. We rested for 3 days and they rushed for 3 days. Now, they are still 3 days away from Yi province. 3 days away, Chu Yang said. Then, what happened here will not be hidden from them. They will definitely guess that we will take action. Dong Wushang nodded. Yes. Then, whether we take action in advance or delay it for a few days, it will all be within their expectations. Chu Yang frowned and thought for a long time. He said, after passing by Yi province, where should we go? After passing by Yi province. Then, we will go to Ling County and then pass by Stacked Rocks Mountain. After that, we will pass by Yukou, Long White Beach, Dianzhou and enter Law Enforcement City. Dong Wushang said concisely, this place is far from Law Enforcement City. It's not too far away. Chu Yang nodded. He looked up and pondered. Han Xiaoran and the others, a total of 22 people, all have their cultivations sealed. He might have even been tortured. However, I don't know the exact situation now, Dong Wushang added after thinking for a while. Chu Yang nodded again with a calm face. At this moment, Rui Badong walked in with a sullen face. Dong Wushang and Chu Yang both raised their heads to look at him. Rui Butong smiled embarrassedly and said, my luck is a little bad. I met a tough guy. I smashed him into pieces, but he didn't say anything. He's got balls. Chu Yang laughed. That's why I said that you're still inexperienced. Any martial artist who had reached this stage could basically face death with equanimity. Even if they were afraid of death, it was difficult for ordinary people to torture them to the point where they would rather die than live. Blindly torturing him is useless. Ribadong said somewhat unwillingly, then, Dong Wushang, have you gotten the answer? How did you do it? I asked. Dong Wushang said solemnly, I only went in to wake him up and tell him that we've captured 15 of them. And Nyo Dafa had already confessed, so I specially came to him to verify it. The first time I asked him if he would say anything, he shut his mouth and didn't say anything. Then I punched one of his eyes. The second time I asked him, I broke both of his legs. Then, I told him that there's no value in him not saying anything, so I'll kill him and ask the others. 15 people, I got the answer. If he didn't want his body and soul to be destroyed and want to enter the reincarnation cycle, he had to say it obediently. Sure enough, he said it on the 3rd time. What the heck, so simple? Ribadong was stunned. I even tore apart the one on my side. Chu Yang snorted. You must have told him that we've only captured 3 people. Rui Badong said, yes, I said it. I don't believe that I can't pry open one of your mouths. Chu Yang and Dong Wushang were speechless. Chu Yang rubbed his eyebrows for a while and said, in the future, try not to let Rui Badong interfere in this kind of business. Dong Wushang agreed readily. Rui Butong's self-esteem was greatly hurt. He wanted to say something, but Chu Yang had already woken Nyo Dafa up. He asked lightly, I heard that the law enforcement team escorting Han Xiaoran will pass by Yi province 3 days later? Nyo Dafa stared and didn't say a word. I heard that there are 8 supreme martial artists inside? 4 first grade, 2 second grade, 1 fifth grade and 1 third grade? Chu Yang continued to ask. After asking 5 questions in a row, Nyo Dafa finally said angrily, why are you still asking when you already know? Fuck, who's the traitor? Chu Yang nodded and gave him a look. Dong Wushang stood up and gave him a kick that knocked him out. Then, he carried him on his shoulder and jumped out with a whoosh. He went to destroy the corpse and the evidence. It had to be said that Dong Wushang was now very familiar with this line of work, to the extent that he was extremely familiar with it. Chu Yang sat on the chair and pondered deeply. He said lightly, "If I'm the law enforcement officer, I'll definitely be on guard everywhere when I'm escorting someone here. So, a sneak attack is not feasible. We have to fight a tough battle. If I'm the escort, since I've already set up a trap, I'll definitely send someone to receive them when they're about to reach Yi province to confirm the news. And for this part of the journey, in order to be able to react as quickly as possible, one supreme martial artist should rush over at full speed when they're about 2 days away from Yi province to confirm the news. The rest of the people should rush over at their original speed. At the latest, they'll be able to return and exchange information with each other in 1 day. They'll have 1 day to prepare. So, their strength should be at its weakest on the 2nd day when they're about to reach here, which is tomorrow. Once they've passed Yi province, their strength will no longer be scattered. And the closer they get to law enforcement city, the greater the threat will be. Chu Yang frowned. "Badong, give me the map." Ru Badong took the map and said, "Boss, if we think this way, so will the enemy. So, they should all know that the journey to Yi province is the most dangerous. They'll definitely put in more effort to take precautions." But Chu Yang said lightly, "It's precisely because of this that we have to take action during this period of time." He looked at the map inch by inch and finally, his finger stopped at a place. "Eagle Beak Cliff?" Ray Badong raised his head and looked at Chu Yang. Chu Yang took a deep breath. "Yes, Eagle Beak Cliff. This is the place where we're least likely to be attacked. The field of vision is wide. And even if we succeed, we won't be able to escape from their field of vision in a short period of time. Their vigilance may be lowered, but how are we going to escape? And bring so many people with us?" Ray Badong asked, puzzled. Chu Yang said, "I'm also considering this aspect." Dong Wushang walked in and said, "Boss, this is a critical moment. I'm afraid we'll have to give up something." Chu Yang heaved a long sigh. "Give up?" Ray Badong and Dong Wushang also lowered their heads. Especially Dong Wushang, who felt his face heat up. As a brother, he understood Chu Yang's feelings very well. But he still had to bring up this seemingly heartless suggestion, because the current situation was that they could successfully rescue the main target. It was already very difficult. Even the 3 of them had a certain chance of losing their lives in it. If they were to take care of all of them would definitely die. Chu Yang painfully considered for a while. He said decisively, "There are 3 main targets now. Han Xiaoran, Sha Xinliang and Qin Baoshan. Depending on the situation, if we can rescue all of them, we'll take all of them with us. If we can't, Dong Wushang and Rui Badong lowered their heads sadly. Chu Yang finally gritted his teeth. "If we can't, we'll snatch these 3 people and leave immediately. If we can't snatch these 3 people, then we'll just snatch one of them." He gritted his teeth. His eyes were as calm as ice. "I have to emphasize one point. Protect yourselves first. Only when we're safe can we save them. If we have to sacrifice ourselves, that's the bravery of a fool. It's the stupidity of a fool." Dong Wushang and Rui Badong both nodded heavily. "Let's start the operation now." Chu Yang stood up and said, "Do the 2 of you have anything to prepare?" "What else do we need to prepare?" The 2 of them smiled. The 3 of them looked at each other solemnly, and then smiled at the same time. That pressure that had just formed was as heavy as a mountain. Suddenly, it vanished into nothingness with the 3 brothers' smiles. With Chu Yang in front, Dong Wushang in the middle and Rui Badong at the back, the 3 of them walked out of the room in a single file. They looked up. Stars dotted the sky and the bright moon hung in the sky. "Let's go." Chu Yang stood up. Instantly, he turned into a wisp of black smoke. Dong Wushang and Rui Badong followed him without saying a word. The 3 of them formed a line and ran in the dark night, facing the night wind. Their destination, their way of origin. Eagle Beak Cliff. 3 black shadows arrived here at midnight. There was only a lonely mountain here. The front part was hooked like an eagle's beak, and there was actually a concave hole in the middle. Other than that, there were endless plains on the 3 sides. The dense green grass swayed with the wind. It was a large grassland. There was a path in between the bushes, winding into the distance. On the other side of the mountain, there was a cliff that seemed to have been cut by a knife. It was straight from top to bottom, and there were some cavities. Looking at the terrain that he could see through at a glance, Chu Yang frowned and thought for a long time. He finally decided on a plan of action. Once the battle starts, don't show yourself, but Wuxiang and I will fight fiercely. Once we rescue someone, you will be in charge of covering the rear. Chu Yang's eyes shone, reflecting the starlight in the sky. At this moment, they were actually somewhat bright. No problem. Rui Badong said, I'm just worried about that 3rd grade supreme martial artist and that 5th grade supreme martial artist, how to deal with them. Chu Yang took a deep breath and said heavily, I'll deal with them. He turned his head. Wuxiang, you've advanced by 1 grade and become an 8th grade saber saint. Do you have confidence in blocking 2 1st grade supreme martial artists on your own? Dong Wuxiang's thick lips moved. He said briefly, I'm just trying my best to hold them back. Within 5 breaths, there's a 30% chance. If 7 breaths pass, there's a 100% chance that I'll die. Chu Yang looked into the distance and said, I only need the time of 2 breaths. Make up for the second update. Chapter 1165. The team was like a long dragon, trudging in the night. As the spring breeze blew past, the thick grass on both sides of the road made a whistling sound. Han Xiaoran walked in the middle of the team with a cold expression. Behind him were Sha Xinliang and Qin Baoshan. The two of them were not as relaxed as Han Xiaoran, because Han Xiaoran seemed to have received preferential treatment. There were no loose items on his body, but Sha Xinliang and the others were chained. The long chain started from Sha Xinliang and ended at the last person. There were 22 people chained together in a chain. The chain faintly emitted the color of starlight. Law Enforcement Master Han, I'm really sorry that you didn't know the right person this time and made friends with bandits by mistake. The one who spoke was a young man riding a horse. He was right next to Han Xiaoran. After he finished speaking, he didn't forget to turn back and scold, Go faster, Sha Xinliang. Although you can't break free from this star chain, it won't hinder your journey too much. As for speed, don't put on a tortured look. Go faster. Sha Xinliang and the others snorted coldly and still refused to budge. Han Xiaoran said lightly, Chu Yang is definitely not an extraterrestrial demon. After he finished speaking, he shut his mouth. Not an extraterrestrial demon? That person laughed and said earnestly, Brother Han, the Dharma Supreme has already admitted that he's an extraterrestrial demon. Why are you still so stubborn? With your current attitude, I'm afraid that it'll be really difficult for you when you reach the law enforcement city. Han Xiaoran said, the Dharma Supreme didn't do well in this matter. If he wants to kill someone, just kill him. Why does he have to give him the title of an extraterrestrial demon? How can he frame someone like that? That person laughed angrily. Han Xiaoran, I'll remind you for the last time. Every word you say now is a capital offense. Han Xiaoran smiled lightly. In order to deal with Chu Yang, he didn't hesitate to torture his own people. I recommended Chu Yang. Although I don't know what happened in the end, I'm sure that one of the Dharma Supreme's plans was foiled because of Chu Yang. Under such circumstances, it's understandable that the Dharma Supreme wants to vent his anger on me. That's why I knew I wouldn't be able to survive the moment you arrived. So, why can't I tell you the truth? That person frowned. You clearly know what you have to do to survive. Han Xiaoran shook his head. I'd rather die than betray my friends. Behind him, Sha Xinliang cheered loudly. Good. Law Enforcement Master, we also want to learn from you. But Sha Xinliang was slapped hard on the face, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. A person beside him scolded, You unrepentant death row prisoner. Colluding with the extraterrestrial demons is a crime even worse than death. Sha Xinliang was furious and shouted, You're the extraterrestrial demons. Your whole family are extraterrestrial demons. Motherfucker, who doesn't know whether there are extraterrestrial demons or not? You know the methods of the law enforcement officers better than you do. If you want to kill me, then kill me. But if you want to play righteous in front of me, screw that leg of yours. Qin Baoshan laughed loudly. Old Sha, You've finally spoken human words for once. I'm very happy to hear these words. The escorts were furious. Whips and rods were lashed down. Sha Xinliang and Qin Baoshan scolded incessantly. Even though their skin and flesh were split open, they still scolded incessantly. The whole team was in an uproar, and the 10 or so people behind them were also in a mess. Some scolded, some struggled, and some cried and begged for mercy. I'm wrong. I shouldn't have colluded with that extraterrestrial demon Chu Yang with Sha Xinliang. I'm wrong. I'll definitely change my ways. Please give me a chance. Instantly it was a mess. In the chaos, a dignified voice shouted angrily, "What's the trouble? We're still on the road now. When we reach our destination, won't you be able to do whatever you want? Do you have to shout like this on the road?" Han Xiaoran stood there with his arms folded and looked on coldly. He didn't stop them, nor did he scold them. Looking at his subordinates being humiliated and beaten up, his eyes revealed infinite sadness and disappointment. He smiled bitterly and his voice revealed endless desolation. "This is a law enforcement officer. This is our law enforcement officer. This is the law enforcement officer of the heavens. Distorting the truth, fabricating things out of thin air, from top to bottom, jackals of the same tribe." After a commotion, the team started to move again. The Eagle Beak Cliff was in front. The escorts heaved a sigh of relief. The original resting place was the Eagle Beak Cliff. The view here was the broadest, and it was the hardest for the enemy to attack. Of course, it was the ideal resting place. 2 figures left the team like a gust of wind and rushed towards the starry night of Yi Prefecture. The trap had been set, but the traces of the enemy were still vague. They had to confirm the information before making a decision. These 2 people were going to scout for information. The night wind whistled and got stronger. In the grass, Chu Yang looked at the escorting team coming over. His eyes were like ice and thunder. As expected, 2 supreme martial artists had already left this place. But the remaining strength was still extremely strong. It was far from what 3 people could succeed in fighting head-on. "Sword Spirit, what level of power can you exert when you possess my body?" Chu Yang asked in his mind. The Sword Spirit smiled. 3rd grade Supreme Martial Artist. "But it's definitely not a match for a 5th grade Supreme Martial Artist." Only the 2 of them understood this sentence. With the sharpness of the Calamity Sword and the special power of a Sword Saint, Chu Yang could defeat enemies of a higher level. Similarly, the Sword Spirit could also defeat enemies of a higher level. But this kind of battle could only be fought by those below the level of Supreme Martial Artist. But at the level of Supreme Martial Artist, it was already very difficult for a 3rd grade Supreme Martial Artist to defeat an enemy at the peak level of Supreme Martial Artist. Not to mention a 4th grade or 5th grade Supreme Martial Artist. But now that the arrow was on the bow, it had to be released. Hearing Sha Xinliang's angry scolding, Chu Yang's blood surged. These law enforcement officers were setting up camp. Although there weren't many of them, every one of them was extremely neat. In the blink of an eye, half of the camp was already set up. At this moment, a desolate aura suddenly appeared. Everyone looked over vigilantly at the same time. They saw a man in black appear quietly in front of them in the night sky, floating over. His arrival seemed to bring with it the desolation of ancient times. Even though it was just a shadow from afar, that sense of loneliness and desolation, that sense of loneliness and vicissitudes of thousands of years without a bosom friend. Everyone immediately raised their vigilance. This person was very old, at least a few thousand years old. This was the first thought. This person's cultivation was very high, very high. This was the second thought. This person was very lonely. He should be a recluse. This was the third thought. In the team, a 3rd grade Supreme Martial Artist and a 5th grade Supreme Martial Artist looked at each other and saw the same feeling in each other's eyes. They were both in dire straits. 1st and 2nd grade Supreme Martial Artists had at most cultivated for more than 1,000 years. Moreover, they had been fighting and learning from each other all year round and had been traveling the world all year round to practice martial arts and handle affairs. It could be said that their days were very fulfilling. They didn't have any deeper understanding of this kind of loneliness and desolation. Only third-grade supreme martial artists and above could understand how this kind of loneliness and vicissitudes of life tormented people, how it made people dream of it in the middle of the night, how it made people sad and sad. Who didn't have friends and relatives? Who didn't have lovers? Who didn't have past memories engraved in their hearts? But now, where were his friends and relatives? Where were his lovers back then? Only the past was engraved in their hearts, turning into a soft sigh in the middle of the night together with the pledge of eternal love. Both of them sighed softly and stood up at the same time. In the next moment, the black-clothed man was already in front of him. He was dressed in black and had a thin figure. The wide black robe covering his body made him look like a huge bat, as if he would fly away at any time. His face was thin, and one couldn't tell how old he was. But his eyebrows were like swords, and his eyes were like two bottomless pools, without any ripples. Where did you come from? The fifth-grade supreme martial artist, Tang Wufang, asked quietly. There was no anger in his voice. He was touched by the desolate aura of this man in black and resonated with him. Moreover, this man looked very different from the extraterrestrial demons in the intelligence report. His temperament was also completely different. Although he was alert, he couldn't help but think that this man might not be an enemy. The man in black sighed and said, "Traveling alone in the middle of the night is definitely not a coincidence. I must have come with a purpose." Tang Wufang smiled in agreement and said, "That's right, you must have come for us. But what is your purpose?" The man in black's voice was bleak and ethereal. He looked up at the sky and said indifferently, "Just now, I faintly felt that there was someone who resonated with me. I think it must be you?" Tang Wufang took a breath and said heavily, "The lonely world, the vicissitudes of life, the boundless secular world, is nothing more than a sigh." The man in black stood with his hands behind his back and nodded slowly. He said bleakly, "That's right, life and death, right and wrong, the world and the heavens are all nothingness." Tang Wufang and the man in black sighed in unison. Tang Wufang asked, "May I know your name?" The man in black said sadly, "A long, long time ago, my name was Kongling. My surname is Jian, and the sword in my sword is Jian Kongling." Jian Kongling? Tang Wufang smiled apologetically and said, "I'm sorry, I've never heard of your name." Jian Kongling shook his head indifferently. "I've been living in seclusion deep in the mountains for many years, facing only the heavens and earth, alone in the secular world. It'd be weird if you've heard of me." Jian Kongling. Only now do I understand that my name is really wonderful. Now, my sword is still here and my whole world is only left with Jian Kongling." Tang Wufang was silent. Jian Kongling said, "You resonated with me just now. I think you also have a bitter past?" Tang Wufang smiled bitterly. "To be able to cultivate to our level, even if it's not bitter, it's still bitter. This is very reasonable." Jian Kongling looked up and sighed. "Even if it's not bitter, it's still bitter. Good, what a good, even if it's not bitter, it's still bitter." "Brother Jian, you must have come for something important?" Tang Wufang asked after some consideration. "I'm here for the extraterrestrial demon." Jian Kongling's eyes were empty. He smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Back then, my whole clan, including my teacher and grandmaster, all lived in seclusion at the end of the world, with the stars as their companions. But that time when I went out and came back 3 months later, I found that they had all mysteriously disappeared and died. There were only traces of blood, but no corpses. I've traveled all over the world and never met any enemy. Now that I heard the Dharma Supreme's letter mentioning the extraterrestrial demon, I suddenly realized. So, I've specially come to see if this extraterrestrial demon is the one who killed my teacher." Yin Tian wrote very seriously, and each word was written with great care. "So, I won a few monthly tickets as a reward. Recommended 2 amazing books. Great God Huang Fuqi's new book, Divine Throne, and Great God He Changzai's new book, Official Luck, are on the shelves at the same time. Currently, the 2 of them are fighting for the new book list. They have already written 300,000 to 400,000 words. Everyone can go and take a look. If you think my recommended books are okay, you can support them by subscribing to them." New books are difficult. I need everyone's help. Chapter 1166. I see. Tang Wufang chuckled. He muttered in his heart, this extraterrestrial demon is only a means to deal with those people. I don't believe it at all. But looking at the situation, quite a number of people have really died. If this one in front of him suddenly recovered, wouldn't he be a great help? However, what he said was somewhat true. Jian Kongling stood there desolately and said, are these all the henchmen of the extraterrestrial demon? Tang Wufang said, yes, they're about to be escorted to the headquarters for trial. Jian Kongling gave an uninterested, oh. A gust of night wind blew, and his black robe fluttered with a whoosh. He seemed to shiver a little and said, these people? Can I take a look? Tang Wufang was a little troubled. Brother, these people are all serious criminals. Jian Kongling nodded in understanding and said, yes, I appeared a little suddenly. I'm sorry. It's understandable that you don't trust me. He stood there in a daze for a while, then smiled bitterly and said, since that's the case, we'll meet again in the future. When there's news about the extraterrestrial demon, I'll come again. Tang Wufang was speechless. The black-robed man Jian Kongling smiled indifferently and nodded slightly. Then his body floated up, and with a whoosh, he was hundreds of feet away. In mid-air, he left a long, desolate sigh. He left in a hurry. It was obvious that he really didn't want to stay here any longer. Seeing his figure become a little black dot and about to disappear from sight, Tang Wufang's eyes flickered. This person seems to be a real hermit. He's not an enemy, and he's indifferent and easy to fool. It's really a pity to let such a person go. Thinking of this, he raised his voice and said, brother, please stay. Jian Kongling's figure had already disappeared. Only a sigh was heard. No need. Tang Wufang raised his voice and said, brother, don't you want to know about the extraterrestrial demon? There was no reply from the other side. But Tang Wufang knew that after the other party heard this, he stopped. Although he didn't turn back, he was already tempted. Then he said, brother, don't you want to confirm who killed your master? Don't you want to know who killed your clan? Are you an extraterrestrial demon? With a flash of a figure, Jian Kongling slowly approached from afar. When he arrived in front of Tang Wufang, he shook his head and smiled bitterly. You're an interesting person. You wouldn't let me see earlier, and now that I'm about to leave, you're in a hurry to call me. Tang Wufang chuckled. The Jianghu is strange now. It's hard to tell friend from foe, please forgive me. Jian Kongling said bleakly, has it reached such an unbelievable level? The Jianghu now. Tang Wufang chuckled and said, however, in the end we still have to believe what we should believe. Jian Kongling nodded deeply. I want to ask them. Tang Wufang said, please go ahead, brother. As he spoke, he waved his hand, and the escorts opened up a path. Jian Kongling put his hands behind his back. Everyone watched as his footsteps moved. They felt as if every step he took was a bitter and bloody tear. Every movement was filled with loneliness and desolation. Everyone couldn't help but feel pity for him. What kind of painful experience, what kind of loneliness could make a person's temperament so different from the rest? With his hands behind his back, he walked to Han Xiaoran and said, you're the accomplice of the extraterrestrial demon? Han Xiaoran said lightly, are there extraterrestrial demons in this world? Jian Kongling smiled lightly. Whether there are or not, we'll have to investigate thoroughly before we can make a conclusion. Han Xiaoran snorted. But in the process of investigating thoroughly, how many lives do we have to kill? Jian Kongling said lightly, about this. It's okay. I've been wandering the Jianghu for 1,200 years. Speaking till here, he paused for a while and said, wandering the Jianghu, killing is inevitable. But I have my conscience book. Every time I kill someone, I record it in it. What crime did they commit, and why they were killed? It's very clear. Even after killing someone, I still have to investigate. For 1,200 years, I haven't killed anyone wrongly. Han Xiaoran's eyes lit up as he looked at Jian Kongling. He said, really? Jian Kongling smiled lightly. My heart is at ease. Han Shaoran breathed heavily, and his eyes flashed with a complicated light. He said, I admire you. But with your character, you'll be at a disadvantage in this Jianghu. Why don't you go back impatiently and live in seclusion? Jian Kongling smiled. Where justice is, there's no need to talk about life and death. What they said just now was exactly what Han Shaoran said when Chu Yang and Han Shaoran met for the first time. Chu Yang was saying, don't be impulsive. When we take action later, don't resist. Cooperate with me. Han Shaoran was definitely not stupid. Once he heard it, he knew that the person in front of him was none other than his little brother. The shock he felt at this moment was really unparalleled. He had been a law enforcement officer for 1,000 years, and he had many friends and old friends. But this time, when he was convicted, those people all pretended to be deaf and dumb. They didn't even dare to stand out and say a word of justice. But this little brother came here to save him regardless of his life and death. Comparing the two, Han Shaoran only felt a surge of emotions. Tang Wufang naturally didn't understand the mystery behind this very ordinary sentence. He clapped his hands and said, That's right. Brother Jian came for revenge, and you want to live in seclusion? Oh, Law Enforcement Master Han, is this how you persuade people to be afraid of death? Jian Kongling smiled, turned around and said, Brother Tang, these people's cultivations aren't sealed. If you're escorting them like this, won't it be big trouble if the extraterrestrial demons come? Tang Wufang smiled and said, It's okay. Keeping their cultivations is for the convenience of traveling. There's medicine in their bodies, and they have to take the antidote every 6 hours. Even if they manage to escape, they won't be able to escape the fate of dying from the poison. I see. Jian Kongling said, although it's a little inhumane, but it's indeed the most effective and best way. Tang Wufang and the others were a little disdainful. It seemed that this guy had become stupid from living in seclusion. He actually said that such a method was inhumane, but he was a righteous person and this was good to make use of. If the gentleman doesn't listen, the gentleman can be bullied? Jian Kongling's black clothes fluttered. He walked to Sha Xinliang and said, This Baldy is really bright. Baldy, let me ask you, what does that extraterrestrial demon Chu Yang look like? Sha Xinliang spat a mouthful of saliva. He scolded, Fuck you. You're the extraterrestrial demon. Your whole family are extraterrestrial demons. Sha Xinliang was very straightforward. He knew that he definitely wouldn't be able to survive this time. Even if the Dharma Supreme was right in front of him, he also dared to spit at him. Since he was going to die anyway, what was there to be afraid of? Jian Kongling frowned and said, You're really hopeless, you're so stubborn. Even if you have the heavenly liquid, it can't clear your head. The evidence is conclusive. You've been caught red-handed, and the evidence is irrefutable, yet you're still quibbling. This is really outrageous. If not for the fact that I don't like to use torture on people, I can easily make you hover between life and death with just one finger. Sha Xinliang roared, Fuck! Heavenly jade liquid. Mediocre treatment of chronic diseases. These were the words that Chu Yang had said to Sha Xinliang and Qin Baoshan. The two of them were almost scared to death by his words. How could they forget it? At this point, if Sha Xinliang still didn't understand who the person in front of him was, he really didn't want to live anymore. Not only did he understand, Qin Baoshan also understood. So Sha Xinliang couldn't help but roar, Fuck! These two short words were filled with infinite shock. But after roaring, he felt that something was wrong and hurriedly added, Fuck, if you're so capable, why don't you try torturing me? If I even frown, I'm not a real man. Jian Kongling frowned and said, I'm just asking you about this, and I don't want to torture you. Sha Xinliang said, That's because you don't dare to. Jian Kongling's eyes turned serious. Murderous intent surged all over his body. Suddenly, he snorted heavily, turned back and said, Brother Tang, that extraterrestrial demon should come to save them, right? How would Tang Wufang know that at this moment, something that he had never dreamed of actually happened right under his nose? He smiled and said, Yes, here. This is a trap. As long as they're willing to come to save them, I guarantee that they won't be able to leave. Jian Kongling looked around and smiled faintly. These forces don't seem to be very strong. There was disdain in his voice. Tang Wufang said, "Don't worry, Brother Jian. We still have 2 5th-grade experts hiding in the dark. This is a foolproof thing." Jian Kongling's eyes lit up. "So it's 2 sides? I'm impressed. Brother Tang, this baldy. I want to interrogate him." Tang Wufang understood and joked. "Brother Jian must have lived in seclusion for so many years, and no one has ever scolded you like this?" Jian Kongling smiled embarrassedly. "Brother Tang is indeed my soulmate." Tang Wufang laughed loudly. He waved his hand generously and said, "Anyway, they're all going to die. Brother Jian can punish them however you want." Jian Kongling nodded reservedly. "I won't make things difficult for Brother Tang." He looked at Tang Wufang with a sincere gaze and said, "After this matter with the extraterrestrial demon is over, if I can fulfill my wish, I'll definitely be on good terms with Brother Tang. It's hard to find a soulmate in this world." Tang Wufang's eyes lit up and he said, "That's exactly what I'm looking for." Jian Kongling laughed and said, "Brother Tang, you're flattering me." Tang Wufang knew that he was going to attack and said, "I'd like to see Brother Jian's skills." Jian Kongling said deeply, "My surname is Jian, and my name is Jian. My best skill is to use the sword." As he said that, he stretched out his palm. With a clang, a long sword shining with cold light appeared in his hand. The night was like a cold wave in autumn, and an awe-inspiring aura instantly spread out. "Good sword," Tang Wufang praised loudly, intending to be on good terms with him. "This sword of mine is more than just good." Jian Kongling smiled conceitedly and said, "Brother Tang, please look over here." As he said that, he tilted his sword slightly, letting the starlight shine on one side of the sword. Tang Wufang looked down and muttered, this sword is good for it." Jian Kongling smiled gently. Suddenly, he shook the long sword fiercely. The long sword was like a soaring dragon. With a flash of sword light, a human head flew up into the air. The head that flew up into the air belonged to Tang Wufang, who had just moved his neck closer to look at the divine sword. Recommended Wushan ****, S.A.O. Tian Quang Zun. There's a link on the page. It's already 1 million words. He's already very fat. Everyone go and kill him. Chapter 1167. A trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth and a deep sword wound appeared on his chest. His eyes flashed and he murmured, "What a sharp sword aura! It's just a collision of aura and it can actually damage my internal organs." And the sword aura was instantly destroyed by the full force of the 5th-grade supreme martial artist. Chu Yang's body flew out like a kite with a broken string and almost lost consciousness in midair. Han Xiaoran, who was on his back, suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. But at this moment, his last bit of clarity allowed him to control the blood in his mouth and not spit it out. With a gulp, he swallowed the heavy pill. Immediately, the sword spirit's consciousness fell into a state of chaos. Although he was attacking with all his might now, he had not completely recovered to his peak state. After this collision, even his divine sense was severely injured. Chu Yang's body was tumbling down, and the power of the incomplete version of the heavy pill was rapidly repairing Chu Yang's body as he tumbled down. And the moment the sword spirit's consciousness withdrew, Chu Yang's own consciousness took control of his body. He tried hard to urge the medicinal power to flow through his limbs and bones. When he finally rolled and fell to the ground, he had already recovered. His toes touched the ground and the sword tip emitted a bright rainbow. Once again, he became one with the sword and flashed across the night sky like a meteor. Flying. Behind him, the 2 5th-grade supreme martial artists exclaimed in surprise at the same time. In their eyes, Chu Yang's body had obviously lost consciousness and strength. All his cultivation was completely scattered by this earth-shattering palm. He rolled and fell completely uncontrollably. Once he fell to the ground, he would definitely be unconscious. On this point, the 2 5th-grade supreme martial artists were both veterans of hundreds of battles and had seen countless of such situations. But they did not expect that this person, who was falling like a withered, would actually bounce up the moment he fell to the ground. With a speed that was definitely not inferior to his previous speed, he even activated the extremely energy-consuming technique of becoming one with the sword. This was really too surprising. Although the two were surprised, they still hurried to catch up. The other party was carrying someone on his back, and his cultivation was far below theirs. He definitely could not escape. Hundreds of feet behind them, there were a few low-level supreme martial artists who were desperately trying to catch up. Everyone's face was full of anger and their eyes were full of shame and indignation. This was too much. This was simply too much. Such deceit, such scheming, such that he would not be able to rest in peace if he did not kill him. Another 5th-grade supreme martial artist raised his hand and was about to launch an attack. However, he was stopped by another person who was speeding ahead. Wait, you can't use that kind of technique. I used it just now, but I was shocked by his sword chi. Now, my internal organs are injured. If you get injured again, I'm afraid these people will really escape today. The 5th-grade supreme martial artist thought for a while and put down his hand. The next moment, he stomped his foot and lifted the ground with one hand. A rumbling sound was heard, and the ground within a radius of several thousand feet was lifted up. It was as if the clouds in the sky were overturned one by one. Then, he clapped his palms, and the entire piece of land flew up from the ground. Then, it violently smashed down towards Chu Yang and the other two who were running. Fuck! Rui Badong exclaimed with his eyes wide open. This was the first time the three of them had fought with a supreme-level expert. This time, they had truly tasted the might of a supreme-level expert. The ground was lifted up and smashed over. With a roll, he had traveled more than a dozen miles away. Then, another dozen miles of distance was within the range of the impact. The three of them could only feel the ground shaking and trembling. Above their heads, everything was dark. Don't worry about this. Just run forward. When we reach Eagle Beak Cliff, we'll act according to the original plan. Chu Yang roared in a low voice. He carried Han Xiaoran on his back and flew close to the ground. On his back, Han Xiaoran said anxiously, "Little brother, put us down. We still have a chance of survival. If you carry us on your back, I'm afraid we're all finished." "Shut up," Chu Yang shouted angrily. "If you want to put us down, why did we come?" Han Xiaoran heaved a long sigh. Chu Yang was right. If they could put us down, why did they come to save us? Wouldn't it be fine to leave us to our own devices? But the current situation was really not optimistic. Although they had already killed most of the opponents, there were still 2 first-grade supreme martial artists left. 2 second-grade supreme martial artists. 1 third-grade supreme martial artist and 2 fifth-grade supreme martial artists. Such strength made Han Xiaoran's scalp tingle at the thought of it. With the cultivation of Chu Yang and the rest, how could they escape with the three of them under the siege of so many experts? The ground that had been lifted up above their heads was about to fall back down. Behind them, 7 to 8 figures flew over like they were riding on clouds. They had already reached the top of this large piece of land. Chu Yang rolled his eyes and shouted, "Target, Eagle Beak Cliff. Full speed ahead. At all costs." This voice was so loud that it was practically deafening. It was obviously hysterical. The people from both sides could hear it clearly. Chapter 1168. After Chu Yang finished speaking loudly, he immediately sent a message to Rui Badong and Dong Wushang via telepathy. Then, the ground above their heads finally came crashing down. The moment it came crashing down, the three of them stopped in their tracks at the same time. Then, they abruptly fell backward. With a kick of their feet, the sword light flashed. Chu Yang, who was in front, actually leaped backward. With a slight sound, Chu Yang had already escaped. He had grasped the timing very well. The moment they came back, there was a whooshing sound above their heads. The supreme martial artists had flown over. Rui Badong and Dong Wushang followed them out like lightning. Chu Yang didn't hesitate either. With a whirl of the sword tip, he drilled out another hole in the ground several feet away from the hole that he had drilled out of. Then he drilled back in the direction that he had originally gone. Dong Wushang and Rui Badong understood and followed closely behind him. As soon as they came in, the ground that had spun up quickly fell back down, blocking the gap tightly. The three of them held their breaths and used the most ingenious method to make the ground solid. Then they rushed forward. Although their speed was many times slower, they didn't make any sound at all. There was a loud bang from above, and the whole wasteland shook. The huge piece of ground hit the ground, and the surrounding grass was actually shaken to the point that even their roots were lifted off the ground. The people above flew past, but suddenly realized that they couldn't see where the enemy was. One of them shouted, "We've been tricked." They said they were going forward, but in fact they were going backward. Then the crowd hurried back to check in anger, only to see that at the root of the ground there was actually a big hole made by sword light. At once, everyone was mad with anger. "Junior, they've gone too far." One of the 5th grade supreme martial artists stomped his feet fiercely. After them, the crowd rushed back the way they came. However, after chasing for 10,000 feet, they still didn't find anything. Finally, someone asked, could they have stayed where they were? Smith. The person who said this was slapped hard. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" That person covered his face, extremely aggrieved. "Didn't I just think of it?" But the crowd had already turned around again and chased back the way they came. When he reached the original location, he still didn't find anything. That 5th grade supreme martial artist was so angry that even his hair was about to stand up. He said furiously, "Even if we have to turn the earth upside down, we must find them. There was no way they could leave. Turn it over inch by inch." One of them said, "Divine sense detection." The two 5th grade supreme martial artists were infuriated at the same time. "If probing with divine senses is useful, do we still need you to tell us?" Although they were angry, they were also very confused. The other party's cultivation was clearly inferior to his. But how could it hide from the probing of his divine sense? But they didn't know that Chu Yang, who was underground, was spreading out his divine sense with all his might and enveloping all of them within it. After his divine sense devoured the divine soul of the 1st-generation Calamity Sword Master, he was now #1 in the world. Even Ning Tinya. They might not be as strong as his divine sense, so it would be easy for them to hide from the people above. "Will we just hide here? Once they leave, we will be safe?" Rui Badong said whimsically. "You must be dreaming." Dong Wushang said bluntly. "They will find us sooner or later." Chu Yang insipidly said. His eyes revealed a cold and sharp divine light as he said in a deep voice, "Listen. When they find us, it will be the most dangerous moment. And our chance will be the moment they find us. At that time, Wushang, you must hold off the two 1st-grade supreme martial artists for a breath's time. Badong, the original plan to cover the retreat will not change. I will do my best to fight my way out and reach Eagle Beak Cliff. Everything will go according to the original plan." Chu Yang said in a low voice. Being in a desperate situation, his eyes were calm. However, he was calm and confident like never before. "You have to believe that we can survive." Rubadong cried out in surprise. "Boss, so your plan has already predicted what happened before? That's why you specially prepared for it?" "My original plan was that if my disguise didn't work and I couldn't deceive the enemy, when I snatched it by force. However, since it didn't work at that stage, then it will be used at this stage. If it still doesn't work at this stage, then it will be used at the next stage. The plan remains unchanged," Chu Yang said indifferently. Now, they have started to move. Before he finished speaking, the ground started to shake violently. 5th-grade supreme martial artists lifted up the ground piece by piece, and then the surrounding people worked together to break the ground. Such an action was spreading towards them. As the ground shook, Chu Yang said calmly, "Brother Sha, Brother Qin, Brother Han, the three of you must also be mentally prepared. Although we have reached this stage, but we may not be able to protect all of you. Once you fall into the enemy's hands, immediately surrender and save your lives, so that we can save all of you in the next time." Han Xiaoran, Sha Xinliang and Qin Baoshan all shook their heads lightly. Han Xiaoran said, "Brother, we are already very satisfied that you can come today. All our efforts are not in vain. We have already lost confidence in law enforcement officers and this world. Even the Dharma Supreme, whose name is known throughout the world, can do this. What can we do if we live? We might as well die. Out of sight, out of mind. As long as we live, there will be a chance. Chu Yang said calmly, now is not the time to argue. You just have to remember to live. This is my only request to all of you. If you fall into the enemy's hands, even if it means death, you must hold on. At this point, the ground suddenly shook. Then, everyone felt that they were in midair. The piece of land that they were on had already been lifted up by the 5th-grade supreme martial artist with all his strength. The people who were left in the soil were all lifted up high into the air. Then, the whistling force from all directions rushed towards them. After breaking more than 20 pieces of land, the supreme martial artists were a little numb. Some even thought that the enemy might have already escaped and they were just doing useless work now. Although they didn't dare to say this out loud, some of them had such thoughts. But there were definitely many of them. The force from all directions gathered. That 5th-grade supreme martial artist had already used his right hand to lift up another piece of land next to him. Obviously, he had already given up hope that the piece of land that he had just lifted up didn't have any abnormalities when it was lifted up. At this moment, with a boom, sword aura swept across the heaven and earth. At this moment, 3 silhouettes shot out from a lump of dirt like an explosion and spread out in 3 different directions. There was actually a flash of red light. Rui Badong disappeared immediately. A 5th-grade supreme martial artist and a 3rd-grade supreme martial artist reacted the fastest. With a move of their bodies, they were already in front of them. They had just reached their positions. Chu Yang was already coming towards them. Right in front of them, a ball of sword light suddenly exploded with a kind of magnificent aura. As if the blue sky had cracked open, it shot straight towards them. Iron walls and bronze walls, the battle never ends. What harm is there in slaughtering the whole world? These 2 moves had already finished accumulating power at the moment of explosion. With the release of the last move, don't retract the blade to slay the whole world. It was already out of the scope of the Calamity Sword technique. Whether it was the aura or the feeling, it was no longer the Calamity Sword technique. But its power didn't weaken at all. Moreover, Chu Yang faintly felt that when he released the sword move like this, the Heaven Divine technique in his body seemed to have suddenly throbbed a little and jumped suddenly. After this jump, the sword aura. It actually increased by 1-fold. Chu Yang's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that the Heaven Divine technique could undergo some changes? Or that there were other functions that he hadn't discovered yet? But he didn't have time to think. He had already rushed over with his sword. At the same time that the sword light exploded in the most violent manner. The essence energy in Chu Yang's body suddenly reversed. Opposite him was a 5th-grade supreme martial artist and a 3rd-grade supreme martial artist. Both of them had long swords in their hands, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. With a wave of the sword light, 2 heavy sword mountains came crashing down crazily. With a crazy explosion, Chu Yang spat out a mouthful of blood. His body flew out diagonally. The speed was actually 3 times faster than when he became one with his sword. The 2 supreme martial artists swayed and retreated at the same time. Their faces flushed red, and they were both very surprised. The other party's move was fierce and overbearing. Both of them felt that they were shaken, especially the 5th-grade supreme martial artist whose internal organs had already been shaken. He even tasted something sweet in his throat and almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He forcefully swallowed it back, but his internal organs were already in turmoil. Both of their long swords had hundreds of nicks in the moment of contact just now. The other party's sword move was fierce and overbearing, and the sharpness of the long sword was beyond their expectations. But what was most unexpected was that after such a sword move, the other party was actually able to immediately turn it into gentle force. In the moment of contact just now, he actually turned their force into his own main force, and borrowed the force to fly diagonally out of trouble. Such a reversal of vital energy could definitely cause an expert to go mad on the spot. But the other party actually acted as if nothing had happened. On the other side, Dong Wuxiang slashed out crazily with his black saber. With his own strength, he blocked a first-grade supreme martial artist and a second-grade supreme martial artist. Although he was beaten up the moment they came into contact, he relied on a rare and fierce overbearing force to not retreat a single step. He blocked the two supreme martial artists from going over to help them. A breath's time. Sure enough, it was only a breath's time. Chu Yang carried Han Xiaoran on his back and came over like a gust of wind. His original speed was already extremely fast, and with the push of a fifth-grade supreme martial artist and a third-grade supreme martial artist, his whole body was already blurry. With a clang, his long sword cut the sword of a first-grade supreme martial artist into two. That supreme martial artist was shocked and hurriedly retreated. But Chu Yang didn't care about him at all. He grabbed Dong Wuxiang's collar, and in the next moment, that strong force really came into play. They were already at the foot of the Eagle Beak Cliff. Chu Yang and Dong Wuxiang crashed into it without hesitation. Immediately, a red light flashed, and that kind of hot aura that belonged to Rui Badong was immediately withdrawn. The whole mountain collapsed in the next moment. Behind the Eagle Beak Cliff was a bottomless cliff. Chu Yang carried Han Xiaoran on his back, and Dong Wuxiang carried Sha Xinliang on his back. Both of them rushed out at the same time, and fell down along with the rolling stones. Immediately, a figure was thrown down. It was Qin Baoshan who was thrown down by Rui Badong. Rolling stones fell down. Chu Yang grabbed Qin Baoshan, and then disappeared in the midst of the flying stones. I recommend a novel about special techniques and superpowers in the city, Abandoned Genius. Book number 2494617. Brothers and sisters who like urban novels can read it and add it to your collection. Today, I bought a keyboard from Taobao. Within 5 minutes, someone called me Kiss 20 to 30 times. I was almost kissed to death. Next, I'll kiss you guys too. Chapter 1169. The few supreme martial artists were furious and chased after them at full speed. In their minds, no matter what, these guys couldn't escape. Especially in such a dangerous place. But no one thought that the other party would actually make use of the most impossible-to-use cliff. Generally speaking, at the level of supreme martial artists, a cliff was nothing. They could lift it up with just a stretch of their hand. Therefore, making use of a cliff to escape was just a joke to the high-level martial artists of the heaven-level continent. Seeing Chu Yang and the others fall down the cliff, although the few supreme martial artists were furious, it was because of the endless tricks and schemes of the other party. They definitely wouldn't be angry because of their escape. If they continued to chase, even if they went down the cliff and went deep into the ground, they definitely wouldn't be able to escape. A red light flashed, and a burst of hot air was suddenly emitted. A young man with red light all over his body suddenly appeared. It was Rui Badong. Elder Rui punched and kicked, and the whole mountain almost flew up. Then, he tangled with these supreme martial artists without any regard for his life. Leaving the job of covering the retreat to Rui Badong, who was really not afraid of death, was definitely making the best use of people and resources. With a bang, Rui Badong exchanged a punch with a first-grade supreme martial artist. This so-called exchange was a real exchange. You punch me, and I'll punch you back. This guy was a little shorter. When the other party punched him hard in the chest, his punch landed solidly on the other party's crotch. A sound like an egg being crushed rang out. Ah 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 ah. Rui Badong screamed and was sent flying, but he tangled with another supreme martial artist. The supreme martial artist who was punched in the crotch directly opened his mouth, and his rosy face turned purple. Then he curled up like a prawn, hissing and sucking in cold air. Beads of sweat the size of soybeans appeared on his forehead. After a long time, he screamed, "Ah, my balls!" Even in such a furious pursuit of the enemy, and in a situation where both of them were injured, the supreme martial artists still almost couldn't help but laugh. Damn it! This howl was simply too creative. On the other side, Rui Badong had already exchanged a few punches and kicks with others. Covered in injuries, he stumbled in front of two fifth-grade supreme martial artists. He was already powerless, and most of the bones in his body were broken. However, he forced himself not to retreat. The eyes of the two fifth-grade supreme martial artists were solemn and respectful. It could be seen that the skinny man in front of him was going all out in order to cover his companion's escape. "Do you want to die?" For such a loyal and righteous person, it didn't matter if they were friend or foe. They were all worthy of respect. "What's your name? Why do you have to risk your life like this?" One of the fifth-grade supreme martial artists narrowed his eyes. "You know very well that they won't be able to escape," he asked calmly. Rui Badong spat out a mouthful of blood. There were also a few pieces of internal organs that could be clearly identified. He coughed and laughed bitterly. Gasping for breath, he said, "I have never changed my name nor my surname. The Luo Kadi you want to capture is me." Everyone was stunned. Wolf Blade was a pervert? Pig heart and dog lungs? Luo Kadi? Since when did the law enforcement officers want to catch such a person? Moreover, this person had such a deep grudge. Rui Badong coughed and spat out blood. He said hatefully, "You don't remember? After today, I will make sure you remember that I, Wolf Sword, am a lowly man with a pig heart and dog lungs, Luo Kadi." Rui Badong swayed. He snorted. "Of course I know they can't escape, but I still have to block them. Even if it's because of me that they can only catch a breath. I still have to block them." "Block you? Good man." The two fifth-grade supreme martial artists praised him, their eyes full of pity. This person's nickname wasn't elegant, but he was indeed a good man. Rui Badong swayed and laughed bitterly. Blood came out of his mouth. Come on, if you want to catch them, just step over my dead body. I, Luo Kadi, can die without regrets." Then he swayed and pounced over, shouting fiercely, "Kill me! Don't let me live to see my friends get caught by you." One of the fifth-grade supreme martial artists closed his eyes. He sighed deeply. "All right, I'll send you on your way personally." He waved his hand. Rui Badong's body was like a rag, thrown out by his palm. He fell onto the stone wall and slid down softly, all the bones in his body broken. But he still smiled and said hoarsely, "Brother? We'll meet soon." "I can't." Then he stopped breathing. The few supreme martial artists all felt their hearts become heavy. Such a good man. What a pity. That supreme martial artist whose balls were broken by Rui Badong covered his crotch, bent over and gritted his teeth as he walked over. He pulled out his long sword and chopped down hard. "I'll chop you." Before the long sword could land, it was sent flying with a smack. Then he was slapped in the face. "Such a good man is already dead. You still want to harm his body?" That fifth-grade supreme martial artist's eyes were filled with tears. He shouted angrily, "Are you still a martial artist? How dare you call yourself a martial artist?" Then he looked at Rui Badong's body and sighed. "Bury him properly. Such a good man shouldn't be left in the wilderness." Then, with a flip of his palm, a large piece of gravel was cleared away, revealing a flat ground. With a wave of his sleeve, a hole appeared on the ground. He rolled up Rui Badong's body and gently placed him in the hole. Then, with another wave of his sleeve, a large pile of gravel flew over and piled on top. In an instant, a tombstone rose. Using his fingers as a knife, he wrote, "Wolf Sword Bastard, Pig's Heart and Dog's Lungs, Tomb of Luo Kadi." After a moment of disappointment, he sighed. "My nickname doesn't match my personality at all." With a wave of his sleeve, he turned around and left. The rest of the supreme martial artists followed suit and leaped down the bottomless cliff. The other fifth-grade supreme martial artist had been watching from the highest point all this time, paying attention to the movements below and around. He didn't find anything unusual, so the enemy must still be below. In fact, the two supreme martial artists were very certain. "If we let you go, can you escape? Where is this place?" 1,000-mile plain. "Where can you run to?" The group of supreme martial artists jumped down the cliff like a whirlwind. At the bottom of the cliff, gravel was everywhere, a mess. But for the supreme martial artists, this wasn't a difficult task at all. Two of them just had to move and they cleared it out. "Dig 3,000 feet. I want you to dig him out." that fifth-grade supreme martial artist said fiercely. All the supreme beings revealed excited looks on their faces. Looking for a big living person in such a range. All the supreme martial artists had the pleasure of a cat catching a rat. Because, for them, this wasn't a difficult task at all. With a whoosh, a large piece of the ground had been lifted up. Everyone smashed it into pieces with a palm each. Then, someone took away the powder, followed by another piece. From beginning to end, a fifth-grade supreme martial artist stood on the highest point, closely monitoring the surroundings. But 100 feet, 100 feet, 100 feet, 1,000 feet, 1,000 feet. Everything was searched. But still, nothing was found. Gradually, everyone became a little bewildered. Did he run away? Right at this moment, someone shouted, "Something's not right here." That third-grade supreme martial artist perked up and lifted up a piece of the ground, only to see a round hole underneath. The soil at the hole was very fresh. Obviously, it was made in these 2 days. In some places, powder was still rustling down. "It's here. Found him." Everyone perked up. Looks like this bunch of guys was quite scheming. They decided to make a move here in advance and actually dug out such a secret passage in advance. It was a pity that no matter how cunning a fox was, it couldn't beat a hunter. In the end, they were still found. "Don't move." That fifth-grade supreme martial artist walked over and looked at the dark hole. He said, "You can't go in or dig up the ground. I want to slowly dig them out." A knowing smile appeared on everyone's faces. By doing this, it was indeed as if they were waiting for death. Torture them to the point of collapse. As pieces of the ground were dug up, everyone's mood became more and more brutal and excited. As if they could already see the depression and sorrow of that person being dug out after being hidden thousands of feet underground. And the current situation was, they couldn't move. Layer by layer, the passage was twisted and turned, getting deeper and deeper. Everyone was also somewhat impressed. Damn it, looking at this guy's actions, was he going to dig for 3 days straight? When they dug down 8,000 feet, they found a scabbard. Everyone picked it up and took a look. The scabbard was very clean, obviously left here just now. Everyone was even more energetic. They continued to dig down. But, after digging down thousands of feet, splashing sounds could be heard. Everyone was dumbfounded. What appeared in front of them? It was actually an underground river. It was connected in all directions and there were many forks. The water surged, taking away all the smells. They couldn't tell where the enemy was at all. It was very obvious that the enemy had left from here. Bastard! That fifth-grade supreme martial artist roared, so angry that all the hair on his head stood up. After spending so much effort, the 7 supreme martial artists worked for an entire night, only to see such an ending. How could they not be furious? Everyone looked at this quietly flowing underground river, and in an instant, their minds went blank. No one expected that the enemy would use such a method to leave this place. As the saying goes, the devil is 10 times taller. Once they left, they would probably disappear forever. Trying to catch them would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. And those hostages, other than those who were suppressed and killed on the spot, the 3 most important people had already been rescued. Although they were all poisoned, Chu Yang was known as the best doctor in the world. Who knew if he couldn't cure them? Looking up, it was as if they were already standing in a huge grave, a grave that they had dug themselves. "Let's go." The voice of another 5th-grade supreme martial artist came from above. Everyone was silent, unwilling, and indignant. But what could they do? Staying here was just a joke. A light breeze blew. It was already dawn. The 7 supreme martial artists finally left. After a long time, not far from where Rui Badong was buried, a voice moaned. Chapter 1170. Then he looked around like a sneaky tortoise. Then he laughed. "It seems that everything is fine now." Chu Yang's face was covered in dirt. Then he smiled and said, "It seems that everything is fine now." Behind him, Dong Wushang said in a low voice, "Boss's plan is really brilliant. How did you know that they would only search the bottom of the cliff?" Chu Yang snorted and said, "Heaven's secrets can't be revealed." Dong Wuxiang laughed and didn't ask any more. His character was like this. He wouldn't think about things that he couldn't figure out. Especially good things. If he couldn't figure it out, there was no need to think about it. Anyway, someone wanted to. Last night, the three of them came here and spent a lot of effort to open up a passage to and from the mountain. Then they dug a hole at the bottom of the cliff. First, the sword spirit confirmed the location of the underground river. Then, the three of them worked together until this afternoon. After resting for a while, it was time for the operation at night. However, the actual hiding place was here. Everyone saw them jumping off the cliff when the mountain collapsed. In fact, they were hooking onto the cliff and going back. And the mountain also collapsed at that time, leaving no trace behind. And the passage to the underground river was there. Everyone would only suspect that they had disappeared without a trace. They would never think that they were still here and on top of the cliff. Everyone was working hard at the bottom of the cliff. Even if they were supreme martial artists, what could they find? The poison of Han Xiaoran and the other two was still very troublesome. If Chu Yang wanted to cure them, he had to use the full version of the heavy pill. However, their poison was a great supplement for Chu Lu. Yes, not only this kind of poison, in fact, any poison in the world was a great supplement for Chu Lu. So, after Chu Yang used the spiritual spring water to suppress the poison, he wanted them to go back to the Chu clan. But the three of them would be too big of a target if they walked together for such a long distance. They probably wouldn't be able to walk more than a few hundred miles before they were caught again. But if they followed him all the way to the northwest, it would be even more dangerous. Chu Yang thought for a long time and couldn't make up his mind. Dong Wuxiang said, "Why don't Badong and I escort them back to the Chu clan first and then come out to look for you? In this way, although you're alone, you won't have anything to worry about. You can adapt to the situation and deal with it. On our side, we can also take care of everything." Chu Yang pondered for a moment and said, "All right. However, even if you were to escort him back, he would still need to undergo an extremely elaborate disguise. Right, where's Butong?" "I'm here," a weak voice said. Then, a human head wriggled out from under a pile of rocks not far away. Rui Butong crawled out with his face covered in dust. He said, "The harvest this time is really big. Second-grade martial artist." Chu Yang suddenly had an idea. He said, "Why don't you lie down and not move? Wu Shang and I will beat you to death 1,000 times today. Wouldn't your strength surpass the ancients and dazzle the contemporaries then? Then we won't be afraid of anything." Rui Badong said angrily, "What's the difference between that and me committing suicide? Suicide is the same as death." Dong Wuxiang clapped his hands and his eyes lit up. Rui Badong said angrily, "If this kind of heavenly nirvana could really be used in this way, every phoenix would have long become the most tyrannical existence in the universe. Haven't you thought of this?" "What?" Chu Yang asked. "Is there a restriction?" "Of course there's a restriction." Rui Badong rolled his eyes and said, "You won't understand even if I explain it to you. In short, it's death and hatred caused by external forces that can't be resisted. Even if one can be reborn from nirvana, that kind of fear before death is completely real. You don't know that kind of feeling. It's too devastating." Chu Yang let out a no. Although he still didn't quite understand, he already vaguely understood. It seemed that this kind of thing, if it was an accident, was completely irresistible, and there were also many other factors. "Every time I'm beaten to death," Rui Badong said bitterly, "I have to adjust my emotions for half a day. You only see the improvement of my cultivation. How would you know my suffering?" Chu Yang and Dong Wuxiang were speechless. Even if this guy knew that he had suffered a lot, he still wanted to beat him up now. He left sneakily. From the beginning to the end, Rui Butong's body blocked Chu Yang and Dong Wuxiang's line of sight, not letting them see what was written on the tombstone. Cough cough, Master Rui was very curious now. When Luo Kadi comes up and sees this tomb, I wonder what kind of expression he will have? At the thought of this, Rui Badong felt that it was worth it for him to suffer a little. He smiled crookedly. That night, they found a small village to stay in. Then, Chu Yang used his skillful hands to meticulously change the appearances of the other people. It was a complete change. During this time, Sha Xinliang even asked a question in a daze, which caused the other 5 people to roll their eyes at him, and he was almost beaten up by Han Xiaoran. Chu Yang, you're not an extraterrestrial demon, are you? The next day, Rui Budong, Dong Wushang, Han Xiaoran, and the others swaggered into Yi province. They displayed the arrogance of the nouveau riche and bought a large batch of urgently needed goods in the southeast region. They directly hired 2 large carriages and many bloodpayers as guards to escort the carriages towards the southeast region. And Chu Yang, alone with only a sword, headed towards the northwest region. While the whole continent was in an uproar, Minister Chu held his sword and didn't move. He looked around coldly and confidently. He walked all the way without leaving a single cloud behind. The whole southeast region was turned upside down. The Chu clan became the target of public criticism in an instant. The newly arrived law enforcement hall first stopped all the transactions with the Chu clan, then cut off the supply of goods and cut off all cooperation with the Chu clan. Then, they joined forces with the southeast Shao clan to attack the Chu clan. If it was in the past, the Chu clan might really be in a mess. But now, old Master Chu Xiongqing's attitude was extremely tough. He would beat up whoever came. The law enforcement hall was furious, so was the Shao clan. They finally mobilized all the forces of the southeast region to besiege the Chu clan. At this critical juncture, Chu Yang's grandfather, old Master Yang Bao, gave up his clan's foundation and brought his family to the flat mountain ridge. To advance and retreat together with the in-laws, it seemed that they couldn't advance and retreat together. The purple crystal mine of the Yang clan had been coveted by the law enforcement officers for a long time. This time, they finally couldn't delay it any longer. Although Yang Bao had a fiery temper, he knew the severity of the matter. He simply gave up his foundation and rushed to the flat mountain ridge overnight. It was better for the 2 clans to join forces than to fight alone. Even if they were to die, it didn't matter where they died. All the people of the southeast region gathered here. And the Chu clan also started to make a big move. They included half of the flat mountain ridge into their own territory. Then, they settled the people in the areas outside the flat mountain ridge. The people also knew that there was going to be a big battle here. They would only be unlucky if they stayed here. Not only did they not resist the arrangement of the Chu clan, they were also very happy. After all, they had left the place of trouble. In just a few days, there were already thousands of people of the southeast region gathered here. Then, people came from all directions. The number of people increased by hundreds and thousands every day. The situation was getting more and more serious. Many people went to the Chu clan's door to show off their strength and spoke rudely. But they saw the tightly shut door of the Chu clan open. A beautiful little girl walked out. She was dressed in snow-white clothes. She waved her hand and closed the door with a bang. The crowd made a scene, but they didn't dare to break in. They went back resentfully. But after they went back, everyone who went there today had a strange illness. Their whole bodies were itchy, and unbearable. They didn't feel any pain when they scratched themselves with a big knife. They only felt itchy. They scratched until they bled and even broke a piece of their own bone, but they still felt itchy. This feeling was really uncomfortable. In just a day, these people were tortured to the point where they wished they were dead. At this time, another piece of news came out. Another group of people who went to the Chu clan to scold them also got this strange illness. Currently, everyone was thinking of ways to scratch themselves. And no matter where they went, as long as someone came into contact with them for half a day, they would be infected with this illness. 3 days later, there were already 4,000 to 5,000 people of the pugilistic world who had this strange itchy illness. At this time, the door of the Chu clan opened. A table was set up to sell a kind of strange rake. It was made from thin bamboo slices, and a single piece of bamboo could be used to make hundreds of them. But this kind of strange rake had an advantage. It stopped itching. Wherever it was itchy, it could be temporarily stopped by scratching with this rake. This effect could stop the itch for the time it took to burn an incense stick. But after that, it would need to be scratched again. It was said that this rake was specially made by Chu Luo, the eldest daughter of the Chu clan, out of pity for these people who had this strange illness. And the price was not expensive. Each rake was only sold for 10 purple crystals. To be honest, the price of 1 purple crystal was enough to buy 100 miles of bamboo forest. 10 purple crystals was enough to buy the entire bamboo forest of the flat mountain ridge, and there would still be leftovers. Now, such a thin piece of bamboo was actually sold for 10 purple crystals. It was simply a sky-high price. But compared to that kind of discomfort, 10 purple crystals. It really wasn't that expensive. At first, everyone did not believe it and did not buy it. But the itch got worse and worse. Finally, someone threw down 10 purple crystals and tried it. Sure enough, it did not itch anymore. This was incredible. The people of the Tian clan flocked to the Chu clan. Instantly, the front of the Chu clan was filled with people. These pugilistic world people who originally came to find trouble with the Chu clan had all become people who gave money to the Chu clan. There were also people who wanted to snatch by force. The Chu clan did not stop them from doing so, but after those people got hold of the rakes, they scratched themselves. Immediately, large patches of skin and flesh started to fester. Then they festered into a skeleton. Then the skeleton was blown by the wind and scattered into powder. Everyone kept quiet out of fear. It was said that this kind of strange rake was named Itchy Scratch by the compassionate Chu Luo of the Chu clan. There was a poem that said, "Itchy scratch, scratch itch, don't scratch itch, don't scratch itch, don't scratch itch, don't scratch itch, the more you scratch, the more itchy you scratch, itchy scratch itch, scratch itch itch. It has been half a month, and my left eyelid has been twitching. It's making me anxious. I went for a checkup today. It's eyelid tremor. It's a problem with the eye nerves. It's caused by staying up late for a long time and looking at the computer. The doctor said it's not a big problem. As long as I stay away from the computer and increase my sleep, I'll be fine after a few weeks. But with my job, how can I stay away from the computer and increase my sleep, let alone for a few weeks?" Sigh. Chapter 1171. The flat mountain ridge was in chaos. The streets were full of scratches. Everyone knew that this strange itchy disease was definitely caused by the Chu clan, but there was no evidence. Besides, even if there was evidence, what could they do? Only the Chu clan could cure you if you were poisoned. Didn't you come to find trouble with me? I'd like to see how you're going to find trouble with me. And this strange itchy disease had a new twist. You used this special itchy scratch to scratch the itch. After scratching, you wouldn't feel itchy anymore. But the people around you who weren't poisoned, as long as they were within 30 feet of you, would start to itch. Slowly, the itchy army expanded to 10,000 people. And it was still expanding rapidly. And the Chu clan's itchy scratch was out of stock. Out of stock. Many impatient people of the pugilistic world were furious. They used their hands to scratch the itch and shouted angrily at the Chu clan's gate. But the answer they got was, Miss Chu wasn't in a good mood these few days and didn't want to make itchy scratches anymore. This time, they were really going to die. Then, there was a major incident where hundreds of people broke into the Chu clan together. However, they rushed in shouting and shouting. After a while, human heads were thrown out one by one, forming a tall pile beside the Chu clan's main gate. It was neat and tidy. Those who broke in a few times had their heads chopped off. The heads were piled up and the corpses were nowhere to be found. There was actually the head of a saint-level cultivator. With this, the pugilistic world people kept quiet out of fear. The Chu clan's strength was actually so strong. Everyone crowded around the Chu clan's gate. No one dared to go forward. With a creak, the gate opened again. A burly man walked out with a bucket in his hand and a large brush in his other hand. Then, he drew a large circle outside the pile of human heads and stuck a card in it. The burly man closed the gate and went back. When everyone rushed forward to take a look, they only saw the words on the card, Human Head Pile Plan. It is estimated that the circle will be full of heads, reaching a height of 500 feet, before it is cancelled. Everyone looked at the circle. They all gasped. A radius of 200 feet. And a head would at most take up a foot of space, right? To be full of heads, and to reach a height of 500 feet, wouldn't that be tens of thousands of heads? Looking at it was already a little shocking. If those heads were actually their own heads, that feeling, everyone felt their blood run cold. He didn't dare to barge into the Chu clan anymore, but the itch was still there. Moreover, it was getting itchier and itchier. When they saw other people scratching their itchiness with satisfaction, their eyes were spitting fire. And so, finally, someone couldn't hold it in any longer and killed the person who was scratching an itch in front of him. He snatched the itch scratcher and started scratching himself. So comfortable, once this head was opened. All of a sudden, the entire flat mountain ridge was plunged into a great massacre. Think about it, more than 20,000 people were itching, but only a little more than 1,000 people had the itch scratcher. This ratio was simply too unbalanced. Especially those experts. Damn it, I'm a saint, and I'm still itching. You are just a puny emperor-level expert, yet you are holding itchy scratch and not giving it to me? I'll kill you. Screams rang out incessantly as blood flowed like a river. There were also some well-behaved ones who killed many people to snatch the itchy scratches and kept them for their own use. And many of them were like this. When the person who was robbed saw this, he thought, damn it, you're here to rob me, I can't beat you. After you rob me, I still feel terrible. Why don't you just destroy it? Let's go our separate ways. The itch scratcher was originally an ordinary bamboo. Not to mention monarch level and emperor level, even the most ordinary martial great master would be crushed into powder by it. And so, many people laughed as they crushed the itch scratcher into powder. On the other hand, the high-grade experts opposite them were enraged. They slapped this guy into minced meat, but they continued to tickle him. In this way, the itch scratcher was even more insufficient. And the massacre became even more intense. The flat mountain ridge, which was originally like a paradise, had now become hell on earth. There were corpses and broken limbs everywhere. Everywhere was dripping with blood. After a few days, the Chu clan's gate opened and a few groups of servants walked out from inside. Each of them carried a bucket filled with black water and held a ladle in their hands. One of them scooped a ladle of black water and splashed it on the pile of human heads. Suddenly, a burst of green smoke rose. The huge pile of human heads turned into a pile of bone powder in a short time, and then turned into wisps of black smoke and disappeared. Such a strong poison made everyone who saw it feel a chill down their spine and shiver all over. Then, these servants collected the corpses in the entire flat mountain ridge as if nothing had happened. After collecting them, they gathered them into a ladle of black water. It turned out that they had come out to dispose of the corpses. All the people of the pugilistic world who came to find trouble with the Chu clan looked on helplessly. No one organized them. If there were too many corpses, it would cause a plague. So, after every big battle, regardless of the winner or loser, collecting and destroying the corpses was the most important thing. Otherwise, once the plague spread, it would be a disaster that would destroy the country. Everyone knew this. But now, these people of the pugilistic world in the flat mountain ridge had no one to organize them. Who would collect so many corpses? Who would have thought that in the end, it was still the Chu clan who did this? In this way, everyone did not know what to do. They came to find trouble with the Chu clan, but they did not dare to make a move. What was the point of gathering here? At this awkward moment, the law enforcers from the law enforcement hall finally arrived. On the same day, they carried out an impassioned mobilization, calling on everyone to deal with the extraterrestrial demons and formulated a plan. Everyone's hot blood that had cooled down started to boil again. But on the second morning, no one walked out of the law enforcement hall. Those who were brave enough went in to take a look were scared out of their wits and hurriedly came out. The inside had become a hell on earth. Which one of the law enforcers was mediocre? At this moment, all of them had actually died inside. Not a single person survived. The leader was an expert of the saint level, but he also died silently inside. His corpse was still sitting upright, with a look of shock and fear on his face. It was obvious that he was killed by a palm strike before he could even move. Who was the person who could kill a martial saint instantly? Everyone's hearts trembled in fear. Then, the Shao clan's team also arrived. But at a place dozens of miles away from the flat mountain ridge, they were all killed by a mysterious person. Not a single person survived. When the news came back, the whole flat mountain ridge was shocked. The law enforcers sent another 3 batches of people over, and all of them died without exception. The Shao clan sent another 4 to 5 batches of people over, and this was the last batch. There were even 3 4th-grade supreme martial artists leading the team. But, without exception, all of them died here. From the beginning to the end, the Chu clan's gate was tightly shut, and the main figures of the Chu clan's upper management did not even show their faces. But, the plan to annihilate the Chu clan in the southeast region had already been aborted. Yes, it could be said that they had retreated and been defeated. The Chu clan's reputation was getting louder and louder. It actually shocked the southeast region just like that. In the end, the servants of the Chu clan began to appear again. They came and went in the flat mountain ridge, cleaning everywhere, and then, those closed shops in the flat mountain ridge gradually reopened and slowly became popular. Everything was as if nothing had happened. But all the surviving people of the pugilistic world seemed to have lost their souls. As if they were afraid that their parents had given birth to them with 2 legs, they escaped desperately. No one chased after them, and no one interfered. It was as if there was a tacit agreement. You can come and go as you wish in the flat mountain ridge. But no one dared to try this kind of freedom for a second time, especially those who escaped from here. They only felt that they had just had a nightmare. And those itchiness, when they left the flat mountain ridge, they found that the itchiness was cured without any treatment. This was really strange. Everyone dispersed in a hubbub. Damn it, I don't care about this anymore. It didn't matter if the people of the Chu clan were extraterrestrial demons or not. Anyway, it had nothing to do with them. Even if they ate people, they kept hiding far away. There were so many people in the continent, why did they have to eat them? Who didn't matter who they ate? Let's talk about it after we've saved our lives. The law enforcement officer said it beautifully. For the justice of the world, for the stability of the world, for the common people of the continent. But justice of the world also needed to be maintained with life. Looking at the current situation, it was better not to use the name of a hero to protect the peace of the world. Being a dead hero was really not as good as being a living bug. At least they could breathe. They had a lot of abilities. Couldn't they eat there? Moreover, they could still pick up girls if they were alive. Driven by such a mentality, a group of heroes who had originally come with a strong sense of justice left one after another. The flat mountain ridge regained its original peace and tranquility, as if nothing had happened. Only the power of the Chu clan continued to expand and expand. Wherever the Chu clan went, everyone would say, "The Chu clan is here? Then why didn't you run?" Let me tell you, hundreds of thousands of people from the pugilistic world went to besiege the Chu clan. What was the result? There were less than a few thousand who came back alive. Elder was one of the lucky survivors. That battle was really earth-shattering. So what if it was the Shao clan? So what if they were law enforcement officers? They were destroyed by the Chu clan. You still want to go against the Chu clan? Extraterrestrial demons? Even if it was an extraterrestrial demon, what did it have to do with you? Eating people? Did it eat you? You idiot. Put away your pitiful sense of justice. Elder was more hot-blooded than you in the past. How about now? Look at me, brother. It's better to be alive. Other than the Shao clan who was planning a counterattack, most of the others were indifferent. Humans were like this. When something suddenly happened, everyone would be angry, they would resist, and they would say that they would fight with their lives. But when they found that resistance was useless, most of them would remain silent, accept, and obey. Most of them would go from anger to frustration, to adaptation, to silence, to agreement, and then to support. Only a small group of people were still resisting. But when everyone got used to it, this small group of people would become rebels and criminals. So many years had passed, and all the original anger had become a matter of course. For example, rule, subjugation of a country, or oppression. In summary, in the current southeast region, the rise of the Chu clan was already unstoppable. The public opinion of the southeast region, those sanctimonious righteousness, those cries for the common people of the world, those chivalrous warriors who exorcise demons and uphold justice, had already been forcefully raped by the mysterious and powerful Chu clan. When the southeast region was bustling with activity, Chu Yang, who went to the northwest alone, met the most important person to his destiny in both his previous and current lives. That old fortune teller. That was the #1 talent in the world in his previous life. Shui Leihan. Today, I got a folk medicine that made eyelids twitch. I applied it on my eyes, covered them with a black cloth and slept. I heard that it's very effective. I'm going to be a masked man. If it's effective, I'll explode tomorrow. Chapter 1172. Dong Wuxiang and Rui Badong were driving the carriage towards the southeast at the speed of a turtle when the southeast region was in an uproar. Along the way, they encountered many powerful people who wanted a share of the loot. After all, this long carriage was too tempting. But the blood payers hired by the two were not mediocre people either. Of course, Fourth Master Dong was the one who stepped in when they encountered a tough opponent. With a saber in hand, he was invincible. Although he didn't use his own dark saber, at Dong Wuxiang's level, it didn't matter what saber he had. This journey became Dong Wuxiang's training journey. He fought his way back to the southeast region. This journey directly became the growth and training of a saber saint. Dong Wuxiang's strength soared rapidly. Rui Badong was extremely envious. Let's not talk about this journey. Let's talk about Chu Yang. On the way through Yi province, he also killed many people who took advantage of the situation, because many people actually blocked the road on the streets. After interrogating a person, they killed him and robbed him of his belongings. They glorified it by saying that he was an accomplice of the extraterrestrial demons. We are enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens and maintaining the peace of the continent. Especially when they saw those wealthy merchants, they would never let them go. These people were despicable and filthy to the point of making people's hair stand on end. If they were really fighting against the extraterrestrial demons, even if they were deceived, it would still be a kind of justice. But these people were not doing it for justice or for the peace of the world at all. They were doing it for their own selfish desires. In other words, they hated the rich. Not only were there such people among martial artists, but there were also ordinary people among the common people. The rich families in every region were more or less in trouble. Chu Yang was enraged as he walked. In the end, he directly went on a killing spree. I don't care if you are a martial artist or a common person. As long as you have such behavior, you will be killed without mercy. He deeply understood a principle. Despicable people did not only exist in the upper echelons. They were everywhere. Since that was the case, he would kill every one of them he met. He would kill until he had no descendants. All of them could go to hell. The craziest time was at a certain place, where there was a rich family. His nickname was Li Dian. As the name implied, his eyes were very big. This person had been lonely since childhood and had worked hard. For more than 30 years, he had built a large family business with his bare hands. Moreover, after they became successful and famous, not only did they not become rich and heartless, but they also became charitable and charitable. When their neighbors were in trouble, they would generously help them. It was such a person who was involved in the incident of the extraterrestrial demons. He had actually been forced to go bankrupt by the people he had helped. Not only had his life savings been robbed, but his house had also been set on fire, leaving nothing behind. Moreover, he was accused of being an accomplice of the extraterrestrial devils. In the beginning, there were only a few people causing trouble. The others who had received Li Dian's favor were too embarrassed to make a move. But in the end, all the poor people in the town joined hands and began to punish Li Dian, that extraterrestrial demon. There was also a strange phenomenon. The more you were indebted to him, the more ruthless he would punish you if you changed your stance at such a time. It seemed that if he didn't do this, he wouldn't be able to get rid of the shadow of the favor he had received from this person. Since I'm already bad, I might as well throw away my conscience. I won't feel any burden if I'm bad to the end. It had to be said. At such a time, Human nature was really worse than a dog. Worse than any beast. When Chu Yang passed by, he saw Li Dian's family of 4 being tied up and paraded through the streets. There were thunderous cheers on both sides. Everyone was cheering that the extraterrestrial demon had been caught again. However, there were also some old people who were whispering. They were angry but didn't dare to say anything. After Chu Yang investigated thoroughly in an extremely short period of time, he flew into a rage. He drew his sword and started a massacre. Almost all the people on the street had been killed by him. After that, he even stayed here for a day. He definitely didn't listen to just one side of the story. Instead, he gathered a few people to ask about the situation and went to each family with his sword. All the people who were involved were killed without exception. The more Chu Yang killed, the more depressed he felt. He thought of all the doctors in the Medicine Valley who died so unnaturally. If good people didn't have good karma, who would dare to be a good person from now on? Yu Lingxue and Feng Yuro could choose to continue being good people because they had that kind of ability. Others wouldn't dare to bully them. But people like the Medicine Valley and Li Dian in front of him, what about them? After this incident, even if Li Dian's generation could make a comeback, would he still dare to do a good deed? Would he still dare to have the slightest bit of kindness? At this point, he couldn't help but stop writing and let out a long sigh. Although this is very one-sided, it's very chilling. He thought of those who helped an old granny cross the road but got blackmailed. He thought of those who sent the injured from the car accident to the hospital but got blackmailed until they lost their family fortune. There aren't many people who would blackmail kind-hearted people, but they can make everyone fearful and not dare to do good deeds. How can the indifference of society be formed overnight? Once one's conscience is lost, there's no turning back. Impulsive criminals can still turn back, but if a person's conscience is gone, then he's really gone. Compared to those prisoners on death row in prison, I think this group of people are the ones who should really be torn apart. Lamentation takes up 200 words, I'll add later. He watched as Li Dian's family took the money that Chu Yang gave them and left this place with gratitude, looking for a place to stay. Chu Yang stood in the night wind, standing on the desolate ancient road, but he only felt waves of coldness. A made-up, extraterrestrial devil was already able to twist the hearts of all the people in the world to such an extent. What if there were other things? Or something similar to the extraterrestrial demon really existed? What would happen? Just walking in a straight line, he had already killed no less than 1,000 people. Then, in this incomparably vast heavenly continent, how many more such things were happening, or had already happened, or even were being planned? At this moment, someone suddenly laughed softly and said, "Don't you feel that this world is actually so ugly? That it makes people want to kill and be happy?" Chu Yang was taken aback. With his cultivation, he was already at the saint level, and a sword saint level. He actually didn't notice when someone was standing beside him. Before this, he had already checked thoroughly, and there was absolutely no one within a few thousand feet radius. Putting aside his cultivation, his spirit was even stronger, and even a supreme-level spirit might not be comparable to his spirit, but he actually didn't notice. This person was like a ghost, appearing without a sound. Not only did he appear, but he was also talking to him. Chu Yang turned his head like a whirlwind and looked over. He saw a gray-robed man in front of him. He was standing with his hands behind his back, facing Chu Yang, looking up at the sky. He looked rather relaxed. He just stood there, but the feeling he gave Chu Yang was, there was nothing here, only a breeze of freedom. Only a ball of nothingness from ancient times. Chu Yang smiled and said, "Who are you?" He immediately calmed himself down. If this person wanted to kill him, there was absolutely no chance for him to escape. So, if it was a blessing, it wouldn't be a curse, and if it was a curse, it couldn't be avoided. At this moment, he also got over it, or rather, the bachelor mentality in his heart was aroused. Do whatever you want. Don't care who it is. Who am I? The gray-robed man seemed to smile softly and said, "Who do you think? Chu Yang?" Chu Yang had already disguised himself, and he was confident that no one in the world could recognize him, but this gray-robed man called out his name. Chu Yang suddenly felt that this voice was familiar, and a person suddenly appeared in his mind. He couldn't help but take a step back and shouted, "It's you?" That person smiled and slowly turned around. He looked at Chu Yang and actually blinked twice. He said, "Isn't it me?" Chu Yang intuitively felt his head explode, and in that instant he actually felt a little dizzy. The person in front of him was actually him. The old fortune teller in Tianji City, his close friend in his previous life, the #1 talent in the heavenly continent in his previous life, Xue Leihan. Just that at this moment. He wasn't the mysterious fortune teller in Tianji City, nor was he the elegant talent in his previous life who was dressed in white like snow. He was dressed in a different outfit. He was dressed in gray and had an ordinary appearance. At a glance, he blended into the crowd. "You recognize me?" The gray-robed man smiled faintly. Chu Yang's atoms apple bobbed twice, and he finally smiled. God knows, when he revealed this smile, the corners of his eyes were a little wet, and his heart was a little trembling. If he wasn't wrong, the person in front of him was the one who caused this in his previous life. Chu Yang didn't know whether he should hate him or thank him. He smiled bitterly and shook his head gently. He said, "I really don't know how to address you. Should it be Brother Xue? Master? Your Excellency?" The gray-robed man was silent for a while before he said, "I like the name Xue Leihan." Chu Yang said, "Oh?" The gray-robed man said, "Xue Leihan, snow has tears, every drop is cold." Chu Yang said lightly, "When snow melts into water, it's all tears. Since it's all tears, then the heart is already cold." The gray-robed man Xue Leihan said, "Therefore, life is full of tears, full of bitterness." Chu Yang's eyes flashed. He said, "Oh? You're saying that my life is still full of tears? Full of bitterness? There's no difference between my previous life and this life? You have a lot of resentment towards me." Xue Leihan smiled. "So much so that you didn't think of another aspect. Snow is the spirit of heaven and earth. When it turns into water, although it can be tears, it can also nourish the world. And it won't disappear. Not long after, it will turn into spiritual energy of heaven and earth. When it scatters, it will become wind, and when it gathers, it will become clouds. When the wind and clouds move, it will become rain, fog, frost, or snow again, descending into the world." The gray-robed man looked at Chu Yang calmly. Repeating the cycle is the extreme of the great way. But the previous life and this life is ultimately a subversion. Chu Yang was silent for a moment before he said bitterly, "Who doesn't have a previous life and this life?" Xue Leihan held a patch of green that drifted over in the spring breeze with one hand and said, "Even this patch of trees has a previous life and this life. Except for a few powerful people who have transcended the cycle of reincarnation, even immortals and saints have a previous life and this life. But since ancient times, you're the only one who can remember the previous life and this life so clearly." Xue Leihan looked at him with his penetrating eyes and said, "Not only have you experienced the previous life and this life, you've also overlapped the previous life and this life, turning into a heaven-defying force, turning into the heart of outer space, turning into the soul of purple cloud outside of the cycle of reincarnation." Xue Leihan said. Chu Yang's face showed a perplexed look. He said, "I don't understand what you're saying." Xue Leihan smiled. "But I still like the Xue Leihan of the previous life." Chu Yang sighed and said, "When we first met, in the purple bamboo forest with white snow, you recited a poem. You said, 'The ancient clouds are originally without face. A snowfall chills the heart of the heavens. Who can determine the prosperity of the world? Who can reverse the heavens outside the dream?'" Chu Yang said indifferently, "I miss the brother Xue of the previous life a lot, but I don't like the Xue Leihan who has everything in his hands now." Xue Leihan's eyes narrowed and a cloud of smoke flashed past his eyes. It was as if the vicissitudes of the world had actually changed at this moment. After a long time, he smiled. "Brother Chu." With the call of Brother Chu, Chu Yang seemed to have returned to his previous life. His eyes were a little perplexed and emotional. He smiled and said, "Brother Xue, The evils you bring upon yourself are the hardest to bear. I applied ointment last night and today my left eye is swollen into a seam. And yesterday I even promised to explode today. There will be an explosion and I don't want to go back on my words. Everyone also knows me. As long as I say something, no matter whether it succeeds or not, I will do it myself. I'll let my brothers down first. There will be an explosion. Please give me time. Now that I'm writing, I'll go and apply a hot towel and apply some eye drops. The speed will be very slow. But there will be at least 3. Chapter 1173. Xue Leihan chuckled. With a wave of his hand, he turned and walked away. Chu Yang silently followed behind. The two of them walked neither too fast nor too slow. Chu Yang didn't use any agility technique. He just walked at the speed of an ordinary person. His mind was in a mess. He was perplexed, shocked, and all kinds of other emotions filled his mind. When he sorted out his thoughts and was about to speak, he was shocked. He saw that the trees on both sides had turned into shadows, retreating continuously. He and Xue Leihan were still strolling one after the other. However, this stroll didn't use any strength at all and they had already flown thousands of miles away from their feet. Slowly, the weather became colder and colder. Then, snow flew in front of them again. It floated down. Xue Leihan finally stopped. The snow in front of him was white. When he stepped down, the snow was buried up to his waist. Covered by the white snow, a purple bamboo forest stood proudly. The whole mountain was covered in white snow, but this purple bamboo forest was so dazzling. Even though most of it was covered by white snow, that purple luster was so moving. The thick white snow pressed down on the bamboo branches, rustling and falling from time to time. The bamboo branches that were originally bent under the pressure shook violently and then straightened again. The scene in front of him was so similar to the place where they met in his previous life. Chu Yang was in a trance. He stared at this purple bamboo forest closely. It was as if he could see a graceful red shadow about to step out of the purple bamboo forest and step on the white snow. When it saw him, it was stunned. Then it blushed and said, "Sir, sorry to disturb you." Xue Leihan walked straight into the purple bamboo forest. With a flick of his sleeves, the 30 feet of snow under his feet suddenly condensed into ice jade. In the middle, a jade platform of ice and snow slowly bulged up, as if someone was slowly holding it up from below. Then, opposite both sides, 2 identical jade stone chairs bulged up. They were made of ice and snow, but they were steaming like warm jade. On the jade platform, a pot of wine and 2 wine cups suddenly appeared. The fragrance of the wine filled the air and the steam rose. It was actually warmed. Everything came from nothing. It was even more magical than magic. "Brother Chu, please." Xue Leihan sat on the chair that belonged to him according to the position in his previous life. Chu Yang naturally sat opposite him. He only felt the warmth of the ice and snow chair beneath him. It actually chased away all the coldness. Within a radius of 30 feet, spring was in full bloom and the weather was pleasant. However, this was clearly a world of ice and snow. Chu Yang suddenly felt like he was in a dream. This is a small supernatural power called withering and thriving in close proximity. Xue Leihan smiled and said, "Brother Chu, do you find the scene before you familiar?" Chu Yang smiled with a somewhat disappointed look in his eyes. "It's indeed very familiar." Xue Leihan smiled faintly. He lifted the wine pot and poured a cup of wine for Chu Yang. The steam of the wine wafted out and a few sparrows flew down, chirping. They actually circled around the wine cup a few times, unwilling to leave for a long time. A smile appeared on Xue Leihan's face. With a wave of his hand, some grains appeared on the snowy ground. The sparrows immediately nodded their heads like chickens pecking at rice, concentrating on eating. "Who are you?" Chu Yang looked at the sparrow on the ground and asked softly. "Who am I?" Xue Leihan laughed softly and shook his head. Chu Yang raised the wine cup and saw that the wine in front of him was dark green in color. It was actually a little thick. He drank it all in one gulp. He felt his whole body explode as if it was on fire. In an instant, he sweated all over and there was actually a faint stench. Shui Leihan laughed and blew on it. Instantly, that unpleasant stench dissipated. Only Chu Yang was left with an indescribable comfort from inside out. "This is my wine," Shui Leihan said slowly. "After I brewed this wine, I traveled the world. By the time I returned, the wine had already become wine paste. What you're drinking now is something I mixed with water." Chu Yang was stunned. "Mixed with water? Brother Shui, it's rare for you to treat me to wine, but you're actually treating me to fake wine mixed with water?" Shui Leihan smiled and said, "Fake wine mixed with water? Ha! Do you know, even if it's fake wine mixed with water, even in the heavenly imperial court, there are only a few people who are qualified for me to treat them to a drink." He paused and said, "Moreover, if I didn't mix it with water and let you drink the wine paste directly, even if you're the Tribulation Sword Master, you'll explode completely with just a grain of rice. This is the real rebirth wine," Shui Leihan said cheerfully. "Rebirth wine means to be reborn, right?" Chu Yang's eyes lit up. Shui Leihan nodded lightly. "In this world, you're the only one who can drink my wine." Chu Yang smiled lightly. "I'm very honored. Now, you've already obtained the fourth fragment of the Tribulation Sword." Shui Leihan refilled his cup and said, "And I've already brought you to the northwest. It's only 1,500 miles away from the Wind-Thunder platform." Chu Yang chuckled. "In that case, I should be the one thanking you." This guy actually knew that there was a fifth fragment of the Tribulation Sword in the Wind-Thunder platform. Chu Yang snorted inwardly and drank the wine in one gulp. Such good wine. Who knew how long it would take to drink it this time? Although it was mixed with water, it was still not bad. He pointed to the cup and said, "Pour the wine." Shui Leihan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He refilled Chu Yang's cup and suddenly laughed. "I'm afraid since ancient times, you're the only one who can make me pour wine personally. There wasn't one in the past, and there won't be one in the future." Chu Yang said lightly, "There will definitely be one in the future." Shui Leihan said, "Oh?" Chu Yang raised his eyebrows and repeated, "There will definitely be one." He said, "I have many brothers, every one of them is worthy of you pouring wine for them." Shui Leihan tilted his head and looked at him with interest. Suddenly, he smiled happily and said, "It's good to have one more such person." Chu Yang said, "You're the Tribulation Sword Master, right?" Shui Leihan shook his head. "Then, you're the person who created the Tribulation Sword." Chu Yang tilted his head and looked at Shui Leihan calmly. Shui Leihan was silent. After a long while, he said, "Not really. The Tribulation Sword is not something that I can create." Chu Yang frowned and said, "Then, what's your relationship with the Tribulation Sword?" Shui Leihan said lightly, "The Tribulation Sword is something that I placed on this continent." Chu Yang was shocked. "You're the person who folded the heavens." Under the great shock of his mind, the wine in the cup actually splashed out and landed on a purple bamboo. With a swoosh, this purple bamboo suddenly grew. With a swoosh, it shot up to a height of more than 100 feet. It was really the tallest bamboo in the forest. Then, bamboo shoots began to sprout from the snow-capped ground with a shwa 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 sound. The bamboo shoots started to grow as soon as they came out. They slowly became thicker and taller. Then they started to extend upwards. Soon they were more than 100 feet tall. In fact, they were 3 times thicker than Chu Yang's waist. Was this still bamboo? Shui Leihan looked at him somewhat helplessly and said, "Yes, I'm the person who folded the heavens." Chu Yang had already calmed down. He smiled and said, "You're indeed a mighty person." Shui Leihan smiled bitterly and helplessly. "May I ask, mighty person, what's the matter that you've come to find me for?" Chu Yang took a deep breath and suppressed the surging emotions in his heart. However, he only felt a sense of bitterness in his chest and abdomen. "You have too many doubts, too many unanswered questions, and too much anger and helplessness in your heart." Shui Leihan said softly, "Today I came here, or rather, the main purpose of my coming to the Heavens continent this time, is to solve the doubts in your heart for you, Chu Yang smiled self-deprecatingly and said, "So I'm actually so important? But I didn't know." Shui Leihan smiled warmly. "I don't treat you as a tool, I treat you as a friend." "Friend? Ha." Chu Yang smiled and didn't say anything. However, the veins in his hand that was holding the wine cup suddenly popped out. "You feel uncomfortable. Your greatest discomfort is that you think that your previous and current lives were manipulated by me. It's as if I played you and caused the tragedy in your previous life, but made you make up for it in this life. You feel like you're a chess piece that's been arranged. You do whatever others want you to do, and you have no power of autonomy at all," Shui Leihan said heavily. "Because of this, you even have doubts about the Calamity Sword. You think that the Calamity Sword is also a trap." He said heavily, "I'm not wrong about you, am I?" Chu Yang was silent for a moment and said, "Actually, with your great cultivation, you don't have to explain anything to me. You know, even though I feel uncomfortable and indignant, I can't bear to destroy everything in this life. I still have to take that path." He slowly raised his head, his gaze sharp. He said word by word, "The path that you arranged." Shui Leihan shook his head and smiled bitterly. He said softly, "With my cultivation, I can easily fold the heavens. With a wave of my hand, all the plains within hundreds of millions of miles can be wiped clean. Indeed, I don't have to explain to you, but it's precisely because I don't have to that what I'm explaining to you is true." Chu Yang fell into a long silence. After a long time, he finally let out a long breath and said softly, "Thank you." It was as if he had spat out all of his grievances and depression with this single breath. Shui Leihan listened to these two words very seriously. Then, with a serious tone, he said word by word, "You're welcome." Chu Yang felt his whole body relax. His thoughts also seemed to have become more flexible. He grabbed the wine pot and said, "Go on, I'm all ears." Looking at Chu Yang's completely disrespectful action, a hint of a smile appeared in Shui Leihan's eyes. He said slowly, "It's a long story. It starts from 120,000 years ago. 120,000 years. Chu Yang choked. He coughed repeatedly and said, "Go on, don't bother with me." He really didn't expect that he would have to go back to 120,000 years ago just to explain himself. Chapter 1174. Sit down obediently. Seeing Chu Yang like this, Shui Leihan couldn't help but glare at him. Why was this guy so different from his previous life? Once he knew that it was a misunderstanding, he actually became lazy. Just say what you want to say. Why do you care about me?" Chu Yang said. Shui Leihan took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in him. He didn't look at him but focused on the few sparrows pecking at the food. He said, 120,000 years ago, in the heavens, a great battle suddenly broke out. There were two people, and one of them fought for years. In a year, the battlefield spanned tens of billions of miles. Shui Leihan said word by word. Cough, 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 cough. Chu Yang coughed with a red face, out of breath. This time he really choked quite badly. The two of them fought for a year. A battlefield spanning tens of billions of miles. Chu Yang felt a lack of oxygen in his brain. Then he choked on a mouthful of wine and spurted it out from his nostrils. Then he coughed incessantly like a tuberculosis patient. A black line appeared on Shui Leihan's face. He pretended not to hear and treated this bastard in front of him as a pile of dog shit. He continued to talk. That battle was really earth-shattering. Everywhere they passed by was smashed into pieces. Some powerful people went to watch by relying on their cultivation. In the end, they were blown to smithereens by the wind from tens of thousands of miles away. In the end, the two of them fought to a draw. Chu Yang coughed with all his might. In the end, they finally came to my territory. At that time, I was worried that they had stopped fighting. I heard one of them say, "You can't beat me." The other said, "You can't beat me either." Then, the two of them said in unison, "In a few years, I can beat you." Then they laughed at the same time. Shui Leihan raised his eyebrows. These two crazy people didn't know that they fought for a year. Who knows how many billions of people and animals died in the aftermath of their battle, but they were laughing so happily. Chu Yang finally stopped coughing. He thought to himself, this is too fucking mysterious. And it doesn't seem to have anything to do with me. Then one of them said, "Where are you going?" The other asked, "What about you? Where are you going?" The first person said, "I'm looking for a place." He took his wives out to play. Later on, the man said, "Same idea as me. I'll also find a place to take my wives to play." Then, the two of them said in unison, "Don't fucking follow me to the same place." Then, the two of them looked at the battlefield and said, "We fought too hard. It's all your fault. If you had just let me beat you up, nothing would have happened." Another person said, "Then why don't you just let me beat you up?" Chu Yang listened and yawned. The more the two of them spoke, the more evil they sounded. Furthermore, he sounded like a hooligan. Furthermore, it was completely devoid of nutrition and content, making one feel drowsy. One of them said, "But the great calamity has already happened. There was nothing he could do." Another person said, "That's right. In this world 130,000 years later, the extraterrestrial demons will invade. Originally they could resist them, but because of what we did, they have no hope at all." Chu Yang coughed violently again. Extraterrestrial demon. Fuck his grandmother. The extraterrestrial demons fabricated by the Dharma Supreme actually existed? Even if the Dharma Supreme himself knew of this fact, he would definitely be very speechless, right? Shui Leihan continued. Then one of them said, "Should we interfere or not?" Another person said, "One look and I know you're ignorant, always looking at others." I knew this was heaven's will. Chu Yang pursed his lips and thought to himself, this person is even more ridiculous. You killed someone and then said that they deserved to die. It was heaven's will? And he kept saying old. How did he sound like a mighty person? He was even more vulgar than an old person. The first person said, "What heaven's will? Bullshit." Another person said, "This piece of heaven and earth has its own primordial world. Unparalleled talents will be born in response to fate. The blood and energy of so many people. We can't waste it." The first person said, "You mean they deserve to die?" Another person said, "If they didn't deserve to die, why would I fight here?" At this point, Chu Yang was really speechless. The first person said, "Then what do you think?" Another person said, "We have to leave something behind. In the end, no matter what happens, it will really have nothing to do with us." Then, the first person said, "All right." Then the two of them beckoned me over. The first person said to me, "You heard everything just now, right?" Another person said, "If you can't hear, then you're really deaf." Shui Leihan laughed bitterly and said, "The two of them were fooling around. I didn't dare to be presumptuous at all. I respectfully replied that I heard them. It was only then that I saw that one of them was dressed in black and the other in white. Both of them looked like handsome youths. One was devilish and the other was wild. The wild one had long hair that reached his shoulders. The devilish one even had a devilish breath. Then, the two of them messed around for a long time before they threw me 8 small pieces of metal. The devilish youth blew on it, as if something was blown away by him. He said, "Leave it for the fated one." Then, they gave me a few instructions and left. When they left, I seemed to have heard a woman's voice saying, "There are men and women, that's yin and yang." The devilish youth nodded repeatedly. He patted the pieces of metal and winked, saying, "Yes, yes, yes." Then he disappeared in a flash. No matter how stupid Chu Yang was, he could tell that the 8 small pieces of metal were tribulation swords. But why 8 pieces? Then I put the 8 pieces of metal in my arms and realized that when they were combined, they formed a sword. So I took it as my own sword. Until 20,000 years later, I followed the instructions and came to the heavenly continent to find the fated one. But when I came here, I saw that everyone was blinded by greed and fought fiercely. There were actually people who kept scheming against me. At this moment, the devilish youth's voice suddenly sounded in my heart. He said, people's hearts can be destroyed, and those who should be killed should be killed. So, in a fit of anger, I folded the heavenly continent and prepared to destroy this world. But at this moment, the devilish youth's voice said, I haven't finished yet. People's hearts can be destroyed, and those who should be killed, but people's hearts can be taught, and those who can be changed should be changed. But at that time, half of the heavenly continent had already been destroyed by me. Shui Leihan smiled bitterly. I hurriedly integrated it, but it only formed the shape of a heavy pagoda. And in a hurry, it wasn't stable. Just as I integrated it, it collapsed again. So, I folded the space again. It became the third heavenly continent. But for some reason, the 8 small metal pieces in my arms trembled nonstop and finally flew out of my arms. They automatically formed a sword in front of me and then disintegrated, disappearing from this continent in a flash. But, after that sword disappeared, this continent became the third heavenly continent. And it finally stabilized. Then, I don't know what happened. So, there was the legend of the Calamity Sword. At this point, Shui Leihan drank 4 or 5 cups of wine in succession. Then, he smiled bitterly. Everyone knows that the person who folded the heavenly continent is the owner of the Calamity Sword. But only I know. I'm not. Other than carrying this sword for 20,000 years and cultivating its spiritual intelligence to become a sword spirit, I'm not the owner of the Calamity Sword at all. And the previous owners of the Calamity Sword are the real owners of the Calamity Sword. But there's only one real owner of the Calamity Sword. And the person who wields the sword in the heavenly continent is the real owner of the Calamity Sword. Shui Leihan looked at Chu Yang with a burning gaze. And you are the number of the Calamity Sword's owner. You can say that. You're the person chosen by those 2 people. Now, you should also understand why I specially came to explain to you. He smiled bitterly. I can't kill you, nor can I offend you. But I can't help you either. You have misunderstood me. How can I not explain? Shui Leihan, the mighty person who folded the heavenly continent, sighed. How can I afford to offend you? Chu Yang felt dizzy listening to him. Now, he finally understood. The land of the Calamity Sword probably contained a big secret. It was definitely not just limited to the Calamity Sword technique. I understand. Chu Yang took a deep breath of cold air. He said heavily. Shui Leihan said, so, you have to surpass my level in 10,000 years and fight the extraterrestrial demons. Chu Yang smiled bitterly from the bottom of his heart. Brother Shui, how old are you this year? Shui Leihan pondered. After calculating for a while, he said, less than 1,000,000 years old. Chu Yang nodded deeply. Brother, you've cultivated for 1,000,000 years and reached your current level. But you want me to surpass you in 10,000 years, to fight the extraterrestrial demons. And now, I'm just a person who can't even go up to the heavenly palace. Don't you think that this is a little, something? Shui Leihan said seriously, I'm telling the truth. Chu Yang said seriously, I'm also telling the truth. The 2 of them looked at each other. I don't care about you. Shui Leihan said, now I'll explain your previous life to you. Chu Yang stretched his body and laid his upper body on the jade platform. He said in boredom, go on. Your previous life is your real life. Shui Leihan said, when you got the sword tip of the Calamity Sword, I sensed it and came down to check. But when he saw it, he was greatly disappointed. So you only got the sword tip and nothing else. This is completely different from the previous owners of the Calamity Sword. And you're the most important generation. Why is it like this? So, I paid close attention to you. But as I paid attention, I became more and more puzzled. This owner of the Calamity Sword is too pitiful. I checked the heavenly secrets, but only saw chaos. I couldn't predict your future at all. Finally, when you were on the Wind Thunder platform, time and space were suddenly messed up. Then I realized that everything was back to square one. As for why you had to do it all over again, I couldn't understand it either. But at the moment when time and space were messed up, I could feel the divine sense left behind by the evil young man vibrating and then disappearing. If I'm not wrong, it should be his doing. Shui Leihan spread his hands and said, "It has nothing to do with me. And I can't save you. I can't stop it either. Everything is back to square one. In other words, those things in your previous life didn't happen at all. You can take it as a dream." Shui Leihan said, "Do you understand now?" Chu Yang looked at him innocently and said, "Do you want to hear the truth?" Shui Leihan smiled. "Of course." Chu Yang spread his hands and groaned. "To be honest, I'm 10,000 times more confused than you were before you explained. Today is the birthday of our proud world's second guildmaster, Guildmaster. I wish her a happy birthday and wish her happiness every year." You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.